Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Hello Gaming Nation and welcome to the Dice Pool Podcast, covering everything that you've ever wanted to know about how to run and play in the Genesis role-playing game by Fantasy Flight Games. I'm your host, GMs Hooly, and this episode we have an adventurous topic that will take us from the deepest dungeons to the tops of mountains to fight voracious dragons. But for the moment, let me introduce you to a smaller band than normal. Of people who I'd start a journey with anywhere. My co-hosts and friends, GM Huzz and GM Flano. How are we?
I'm doing okay.
Doing pretty well. Yeah.
Pretty good, yeah. We're minus poor Caitlin. She is unwell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
she rolled in despair.
She did roll to despair, but she has sent her apologies to her fans and obviously fans of the podcast. So, but yeah. So what's everybody been up to gaming-wise?
Why don't you start us off?
Well, what have I been up to? Nothing much at all. No, I've got a project at the moment for FFG, which I can't talk about, but that's been taking up a lot of my time, which has been pretty cool. I do like writing for them. I don't know how much I can say about what world I'm in, but anyway.
No, but you can tell everyone how excited you are.
Yes. Yes, great story. So that's what I've been up to. Yep. Other than that, there's been a bit of a lack of gaming in my life lately. Oh, apart from just prior to the show, Mike showed me how to play Keyforge.
Yeah. I did.
It is really cool.
It's, as I said, prior to us playing, I said you'll pick it up in about 10 seconds.
And I did.
It's a really good game. It's surprising how deep it is for such a simple mechanic. The mechanics of the game are really, really basic.
Yep.
I can't emphasize that enough. They really are.
Yeah.
I've taught now 7 people to play, and my first game was only a couple of days ago as well. So that's how quickly it is to pick up.
Yep.
Yeah, it's great. Fantastic game. It seems to really open the door for non-card game players to sort of dabble into it as well.
Yeah, well, deck building is a big barrier to a lot of games.
It is. Deck building and the meta chase is huge.
Yeah.
And
it was forever changing.
It is forever changing, and the money you have to spend to keep up with that is bananas. In Keyforge, for those who don't know what it is, the decks are pre-built by a computer algorithm. And every single deck produced rolls out of the factory totally unique. So there's never 2 decks the same in the world.
Which is why the simplicity of the game is so important, because it allows for that.
Yeah, it really does. Because there is a surprising amount of synergy in these decks.
Yeah.
Like I was leading up to its release of Keyforge, I was a little bit on the fence if it would be overly synergistic in terms of how the cards play. But every game I've played so far with every deck I've played, there's been great synergy. Ian's deck today was actually really good. Like he cracked it open for the first time, and it seemed to play really, really well. It rolled my deck, so that's a good sign of a pretty strong deck. But yeah, well, you're not a big card player, Ian. So
not even a little bit.
Is it appealing to you?
Absolutely. Oh, I now want to go out and buy another deck. But yeah, because I didn't want to make a huge investment, because I made a huge investment when it came to L5R, and L5R I just didn't get.
That wasn't a huge investment.
You bought one starter.
I bought one starter. Okay, that's fair enough. But, I bought a starter and then I ended up selling it because it just didn't quite grab me. But this, I had an investment of $15, played a deck, and I've the artwork's great, the concept's great.
That's one thing that FFG do really well is the art assets at their disposal are massive, and they just keep putting more stuff out.
What's really interesting is that there's some local talent to Australia that has been brought on board to do some of the artwork as well. Some of them were at Supernova about a month ago. Not Supernova, Comic-Con. And got to speak to one of the guys there, and his artwork is spectacular. So I'll have to check out which is his. It's really, really good. Sorry, Mike.
You should apologise for beating me. No, what was I going to say? The artwork is really cool because as much as I like other FFG games, like Destiny's a perfect example. I've seen all that Star Wars art in RPG books and every other Star Wars game a million times. For the most part. So it's good to see fresh new stuff and in a fresh new setting as well. So it's all totally unique.
Exactly.
So if the RPG department is listening, or FFG, I think a Keyforge setting book for Genesis would be really, really cool.
That would be amazing.
Because I'd buy it.
Yeah. Be interesting. So what other gaming have you been up to, Mike?
Keyforge, obviously, but that's only fairly fresh. That only came out a couple of days ago as of the recording of this. Other games, not much in the way of role-playing. We've still been in a bit of a hiatus for the last couple of weeks. But we've got a Star Wars game coming up, which is exciting. I've been playing a bit of BattleTech, Alpha Strike, which is a tabletop game.
Yeah.
I've gone fully into that, painting miniatures again, etc.
And they look awesome.
Yeah, they turn out quite well. I picked my favourite colour scheme, red and black, or black with a bit of red, and you just can't go wrong. I've narrowed the painting time down to 3 episodes of Seinfeld and Mech.
Look, that's actually really good. So,
It turns out quite well. I get home from work and I make a habit of sitting down, chuck Seinfeld on, and then paint a mech, and I feel like I've accomplished something for that afternoon, which is good. Apart from that, I've been playing a lot of Overwatch on PC again. I'm back into that. Red Dead's floating about. Played a fair bit of that. I keep going back to it, but at the moment, Overwatch has got my attention again, so I can't escape its grasp. That's just the way I roll. But yeah, that's basically been me.
Because not being a very big computer gamer at all, for me anyway, is that something that sort of there is so much hype that comes out with the release of a computer game, and then all of a sudden it just dies?
Well, yes and no.
It's not with. I mean, maybe it's just the people that I see on social media, but there was so much hype about Red Dead Redemption, and then all of a sudden,
because you look at it this way: so a solo player game, single player, has like 50 hours of playtime in it.
Well, Red Dead's about 100 or so.
Well, it's an exception to the average.
Right. 20 to 40, I'd say, is your average.
And so they're not exactly the most social of games. The social aspect that comes out of it and that you see on social media is people talking about their adventures going through it. But 100 hours goes by pretty quickly.
Okay.
You know, I don't know, when did it come out? Like
a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
It sold 16 million copies.
A lot of people have already finished it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like,
so and the move on to the next one.
Well, the multiplayer's yet to even come out.
Well, that's it. So they'll go. You'll see it come back as people replay or the multiplayer comes out, and they'll go back to it. But the big fanfare is a flash in the pan. The build up, and then it's out, and then people are playing it.
Really?
Grand Theft Auto did exactly the same thing.
Well, that's it.
Grand Theft Auto, its multiplayers made more money than any other media franchise. More than any film, more than any gaming series. It's something like in the billions mark. I think it's made more than Star Wars.
Wow.
I could be wrong, but that's because its multiplayer has this massive, insane following where the fans throw money at it, and Rockstar are loving it because they're just rolling in fat cash now. But that's why Rockstar make really good games, because they're an independent studio. They're not beholden to anyone other than themselves.
Yeah.
So that's why every single Rockstar game that comes out, you almost guaranteed a quality game. And Red Dead is a perfect example of it. I've not played a game that solid for a very long time. There's everything about it is meticulously crafted. It's just insane, the level of degree of detail that they put into that game, even down to the fact that your horse's testicles shrink in cold weather.
Really?
Really, that happens.
Wow.
Yep.
That's detail.
It is very detailed.
That's really
and then you have a
detailed.
wild buck come along and just headbutt you across the field.
There's lots of things happen in that game, which is quite entertaining. But
that's insane. There you go. So, yeah, for those people who aren't into computer games like I'm not, you've now been educated. So it's all good.
The games that tend to stick around in the public eye are the multiplayer games.
Right.
Because people come and go from them all the time.
Yep,
And
yep.
they're continuously cycling thing. Like Overwatch is, Overwatch isn't that big anymore, but games like Fortnite and etc. Battle Royales is the new big thing. Personally, I can't stand them. But a lot of people really love them, so that's why you see them just everywhere on social media.
An example, though, of a solo player, a single player game that has stuck around and you keep hearing about, but it'll give you an idea of how much you expect them to be talked about.
Yep.
Skyrim, like Skyrim
And Fallout.
and Fallout, yeah, they're
True.
endless replayability. But you don't hear someone talking about it every day.
No, true.
But
okay.
yeah,
That's fair.
So how about you, Martin? What's your gaming?
a lot of MechWarrior Online.
Oh, that game where I can play a game sometimes. If the lobby allows me to play a game.
I don't get it. Like, it only takes me about 10 minutes at most to get into a game.
That's disgusting.
No, at most.
Oh man,
That's like waiting in the longest queue. Like otherwise,
There's a queue.
I literally
well, that's all multiplayer games have a
So
queue.
that's kind of like...
For me, no,
World
that's
of
the
Warcraft.
longest one. Normally, it'll only take me like 5 minutes.
like every time I reinstall this game, why do I keep uninstalling this? Oh, I see.
How long do you wait for an Overwatch game?
About a minute 20 on average.
Not always.
Yeah. Do you want to mind MechWarrior Online? Average waiting time is, Martin?
Yeah.
About 30 minutes.
I
will literally
I don't get that.
minimize
I've never
it
waited
and
that
play
long.
Overwatch while I wait to get into a game of MechWarrior Online that lasts for about 5 minutes.
Right.
It's not good value for my time.
Faction play will last longer, but then it's a longer queue.
I'll just 2 hours to play 10 minutes. Again, the economy for time is just not.
No, but I'm having a lot of fun with it.
MechWarrior 5 comes out next year.
Now that's what I'm looking forward to. MechWarrior 5. No, you have no idea. Like,
No,
been
clearly I
waiting
don't.
for this game for so long.
Right.
It was meant to come out this year.
I know, and they push it back. As long as it comes out good, I don't mind them pushing it back. Like,
The difference between MechWarrior Online and MechWarrior 5, MechWarrior 5 is a follow-up to the other MechWarriors in the series, which is, it's got a true storyline like MechWarrior Online where you just shoot each other and GG. MechWarrior 5, it's 4-player co-op, and you work in a lance of, a mercenary lance, so you control the mechs, you build and customize your mechs.
that's what I'm looking forward to.
And then you drop down in the missions, and they're completely sandbox missions.
Yep.
You do them as a group with your players, with your buddies. Then the entire galaxy, which you do mercenary jobs in, is also sandbox. So
Similar
it's a massive world.
to BattleTech, the
RTS.
The RTS,
Well,
yeah.
turn-based strategy, I guess it is. But yeah.
Yeah. But it's good, yeah.
So lots of MechWarrior Online.
Yes.
I got derailed in my anger for the waiting time for MechWarrior
Oh,
Online.
look, the waiting time is long, but that's because there's a lower player base these days than there used to be. But that's pretty much what I've been playing. I've been playing that, World of Warcraft, and a little bit of Destiny, which just because they gave it to me for free. So
Let's play our game. I'll give it to you.
well, it was a gift for the year anniversary of them having it on the Battle.net launcher.
Just happened to coincide nicely with the dropping player numbers. Coincidence, we swear.
But as I said, I haven't had much chance to do tabletop anything at the moment. So looking forward to our next game.
Well, there is one thing, something that I have decided I'm not going to be doing any more of. Blood Bowl.
Yeah.
I now remember, after what Mike had said, because I played a couple of games, and I remember why I stopped playing.
Because when you lose for an hour?
Yeah, pretty much. I got absolutely smashed. Does that make me,
No, okay.
Yeah, no, it just means you woke up to yourself.
Okay, it can be great, but the thing is that the game that you're playing is not just on the table.
No.
Like, you're playing in a league.
Yeah.
If you're just playing one-off games, there's no point. Yeah. So getting crushed for a game, a match could just be about minimizing your losses so that you maintain your rankings in the league.
Yeah. I just think that as far as balance goes, because balance is important in the game to me, and there are some teams, and I was playing Nurgle, and that team, in my opinion, is so unbalanced in comparison to, say, the Dark Elves, which is what I was playing. I may never ever come anywhere near them again, but...
Is that because Nurgle are bashers and they're just going to
Look, there was a bit of bashing, but then within 3 tackle zones or something like that I can't do something, and it just sort of...
Do you know there's someone listening right now that'd be saying, get good at scrub? That's good.
And now they don't need to say it because...
because Mike has been kind enough to say it, so yes.
Well, honestly, I would have quit Blood Bowl before I even showed up to play Blood Bowl.
Okay, but what I want to do is I want to play Necromunda.
Yeah,
and it still hasn't happened, and I want to do it. I've got the models.
I've got the models too, man, but you're too busy waiting in MechWarrior Online queues.
Hey.
I literally rang up the other day and said, "Hey, Martin, can we play Necromunda?" And you went, "No,
no, you didn't.
I am waiting in line to play MechWarrior Online." Oh no, that's why it's called MechWarrior Online. It should be called MechWarrior Inline.
Oh dear. All right. So before we go any further, Martin, would you like to take us through our podcast of the week?
Well, this week we spotlight the Movie Defenders podcast, a show where those movies, old and new, that you love or hate, get the Defenders treatment, full of news, comedy, but mostly an in-depth look at their movie of choice. So join Scott and Donald as they defend the undefendable on the Movie Defenders podcast. You can learn more about this and many more podcasts on the D20 Radio Network by visiting www.d20radio.com.
And this last episode that they had, episode 30, they decided to defend Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, I know that a lot of people don't like it, and I agree with them. It's number 4 in the listing of where it sits, but it prompted Ethan and I, because Ethan and I have been listening to it in the car on the way to school every morning, and it prompted us last night to watch Crystal Skull, and it's not as bad as I remember.
It's not that bad of a movie. It's just it has parts in it that make you cringe so hard you turn inside out. That's the drawback to it.
And I say this about a lot of movies. Yep. Whenever I go into a movie, I don't go in expecting it to be amazing.
Yeah.
I go in hoping that I have a fun time. And if it meets that basic requirement, I think of it as I think well of the movie.
Yeah.
Which is why people accuse me of liking everything.
But it's true. Like, having listened to the Movie Defenders a little bit more now, I have taken that step of every movie that I go into that I will not go in with any expectations, as what you just said there. And it has actually increased the level of enjoyment for most films, except for Valerian. I know that they defended it a few episodes ago.
There's no defending that movie.
No, there's not. And I mean, hey, look, make up your own mind. But
on the topic of the Crystal Skull, it's it's an all right movie. It is Indiana Jones, but I just think that the topic that it followed, there were better topics that they could have picked.
Oh, look, having listened to the guys now and watched the film, it's set in the 50s. And the 50s was all about Reds under the beds. Yeah. It was all about aliens and that whole metaphor of, the aliens are the communists and whatever else.
Yeah, but they could have
suited it so much.
They could have tied it into the other movies, though, and had like the Spear of Longinus or something as the...
Yeah, they could have gone down the religious path, sure.
Which is what they've done for every other movie. Like that was...
I think the problem is it's very jarring, as well. A lot of people had
because it is so different to the others in that regard. Sure. Which is why I think that they could have had all of that. It could have been the Red Scare that was, trying to get a hold of the Spear of Longinus and all of that sort of thing. That's my personal opinion, and don't let me get carry away the whole podcast.
Yes. Listen to the Movie Defenders. They do a great job, and Scott and Donald are really nice guys. So yeah, definitely go and take a look at that. So speaking of the D20 Radio Network, have you all heard about Gamination Con, the best little international gaming convention on the planet? Well, if you haven't, Gamer Nation Con is a 4-day gaming convention, and this year it'll be held in Plano, Texas. Not plain old Texas, as was mentioned in the last show, but that'll be held between the 4th and the 7th of April 2018, and this year we'll be all making an appearance. So that will be a lot of fun, and we'll be gaming with a whole heap of people who are fans of the podcast, which is really, really cool. Additional guests this year have just been announced, one of which is Andy Hurley of Fallout Boy. I have not told Ethan this fact because he is a massive Fallout Boy fan. And if I mention that, I will have to be taking him. So, yes, budgets won't necessarily allow it. But anyway.
Really? So, you're not going to tell him?
Do not get up and tell him right now.
So if I could use it as some sort of blackmail.
You could. Maybe you should. Yeah, maybe. But anyway. Okay. So how do you get tickets? Well, tickets is basically you just go to Kickstarter and you can search Gamer Nation Con 6 and look for the blue superhero banner. And click on that. Tickets are selling very, very fast. If not, as of the time of this recording, they may be completely sold out altogether. So, get in there and do that. And don't forget, if you can't go, you can still become a backer and get access to the vault of games and supplement available to those who also attend. So should we get on to tonight's topic, which is full of magic and fantasy?
Oh, you mean core of the show?
Onward! Core of the show. And welcome to Core of the Show, the segment where we will take a deep dive into a topic concerning the Genesis role-playing game and, of course, gaming in general. Now, tonight we are exploring the Genesis setting book Realms of Terrinoth, which was the first formal setting book released by FFG to go with the Genesis core rulebook. It came out a couple of months later after the release, so that everybody was used to that setting, or used to the system of Genesis. And they've gone and said, right, fantasy is the first thing that we're going to tackle. So they've used their Terrinoth setting material that they've had from the Runebound setting and Rune Wars and whatever else. So before we get into what the core, it's the book itself is what it contains and all the ins and outs, pages and stuff
and words.
How about we just have a little bit of a group discussion about what Terrinoth is? Sound like
it's a book.
It's a setting.
It is a setting and it's a book. Yes, very, very good.
I'm very astute.
It has realms.
Right. There you go. Done. Right.
All right, pack it up.
So, okay. So for those people who don't really know what Terrinoth is about, Terrinoth has been in FFG's catalogue for quite some time. Well, parts thereof with, as I said before, the Runebound setting, Rune Wars, and a lot of their other card and board games.
They've got tabletop, they've got board games, they've got cards, as you say. It's a fully realized world.
A lot of the background and stuff came from Descent as well, which is it's kind of like Imperial Assault for a fantasy setting, effectively. I think that's where a lot of the rules actually that they dragged from or dragged to Imperial Assault actually came from Terrinoth. Or came from Descent. So basically, Terrinoth is an old world. So it's been through a major cataclysm insofar as the world was under attack by three predominant forces, which were the undead, the demons, as well as the dragons. And they brought about the thing which was called the Three Darknesses.
Do you reckon someone had just woke up one day when this big bad event was happening and try to tell their CEO that there's dragons and there's all this stuff. There's a lot of bad things that be happening at once. I'm just saying that's...
Well, it didn't all happen at once.
No, and that's the whole thing. It didn't happen at once. It basically happened over different ages, but each one progressively got worse. to the point.
It rode on the back of the failures of the previous.
Yeah, absolutely, and which made matters worse. So that's basically the ins and outs of where the world has basically come from. And there's sorry, Matt.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think the most important thing to note about the world was that magic is a bit different.
Yep.
Because essentially a wizard a long time ago got a brilliant idea to infuse, what was it, like all magic?
Yep.
Into a big giant orb.
Right.
So that it was available for all. Great idea.
Yes.
And he succeeded.
Leaving the world with no magic.
Well, there was magic everywhere. It was, but the problem was that it shattered, and that's where you get the shards, the runes and things like that. And then that caused the wars over the shards, and then the darknesses, and then So magic is a little bit more controlled. You can have people that can, tap into it and do all of that, but there are these shards which are massively powerful artifacts that people can access magic through those as well.
Yeah, yeah. The if people want to have a little bit of an idea as to how Terrinoth sort of like plays out, if they go back and listen to our first episode that we did of our live plays, I did a little bit of a sort of a narration type thing up at the start, which gives you a little bit of an idea as to where the world is. But effectively, things have gone quite badly, but the big bads have basically gone to sleep or disappeared, and it's allowed the people of the world to increase their numbers and start to explore. There's lots of ruins. There's lots of areas which were populated at one point but have been completely and utterly demolished. And so now, as the big bads, and you talked before, Mike, about the three big bads all attacking at once. Well, they all seem to be waking up all at the same time. And this is the big problem that is happening on the world. So, that's making things a little bit more difficult for everyone.
So the big bads had a big bad nap, and
they've all had a big bad nap, and now they're all waking up from their slumber.
They're all cranky.
They're all cranky, pretty much.
All right,
pretty much.
Can't blame them.
So yeah, so now we've basically got a large portion of the world, which is basically called Terrinoth, but that's not the world itself. The world itself is called Mennara. And Terrinoth is like consider it a large country within the world. And then you have a number of places which sort of are connected to all of that. And that would obviously be the Lorimor Empire, the Ishame, which is like your frozen wastes and whatever else. You've then got the jungles of Xanaga, I think that's how it's pronounced, and then you've got the deserts of Al-Kalim. So what it is, I guess, is that all of those areas are all the sorts of fantasy tropes that we've experienced with Lord of the Rings, with D&D, with any sort of fantasy setting. They've all got that. When I read it for the first time, it reminded me very much of Galarian from Pathfinder. There are obviously some distinct story differences, but the more I looked at it is that all of the worlds, when it comes to fantasy, have all got these different areas which pretty much the Terrinoth has had baked into it as well. So yeah.
Now, I just want to interrupt for a moment. I want to correct myself before about the Orb of the Sky.
Right.
It wasn't all magic that was bound in.
Okay.
It was meant to be a vast reservoir of magic in order to have provide power for future generations of wizards with less risk of corruption by the Infernal.
Yeah,
which is one of the big bads, as you said.
We're sleeping now, so what's everyone worried about?
Well, no, the Infernal's a realm.
It just sucks to creep around the house in case you wake him up.
So the first part of the book itself is dealing exactly with the ins and outs of Terrinoth. how it all came about, the history of the world, everything that the GM is going to need. What's interesting is that it's told from the perspective of a character, a lot of it. So the way that the reason why they've done it that way is so that you don't necessarily need to be beholden to that. You can just use that as, well, that's that person's perspective. But in actual fact, it didn't happen that way. It happened this way.
Well, this is what makes Terrinoth a great Genesis setting, is because it sketches in a lot more of the details than Genesis does, but it still leaves a lot open to your own interpretation.
And it goes into, obviously, elves, and you've got the elves are the ones that are mainly fighting the dragons, and the dwarves are also fighting the dragons, and the orcs, they're fighting the undead, and then humans fight everything else, basically. Yes. As we do. as we do. And the orcs were very much enemies of the humans, and now the orcs have sort of banded together with the humans to go, you know what, it's all really bad, and we all need to sort of work together. All the humanoid races are working together to fight the three darknesses as they arise. So yeah, that's pretty much chapter 1. What do you guys think of chapter 1? Were anything that sort of stood out to you that was sort of made Terrinoth a little bit different than other fantasy settings?
Well, that that it provides broad strokes, that it is a setting that, as you say, you can still sketch in a lot for your own game.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of other settings have been, and this one has been established for a long time, but because it's only existed in, tabletop and card games and things like that, there's still a lot to be filled in.
Yeah.
And that's for you. That's sort of what I got from that part.
Because I don't think that there was, just from the little bit of research that I did before the show, there doesn't seem to be a lot of hard lore on the world until we got the likes of Realms of Terrinoth, as well as there's another game that they did as well, which was sort of almost choose your own adventure type thing. Legacy of Dragonhold, which is a sort of a narrative adventure game set in the rune-bound world. If you guys know of anything that is hard lore specific, please point us in the right direction, because I would love to learn more. Yeah, I mean, there is an entire wiki on it.
There is, yeah.
Which when we first did the initial...
I like to get my hands on books, though.
True. But hey, look, in this modern day and age, with everybody going online, there is a lot of resources out there that you can draw from, as far as stories. So, so obviously a lot of... And we will have the opportunity in the not too distant future to actually ask the producers about the world and what sort of work that they had to do to generate it in the first place. But a lot of the time, it looks as though a lot of the key lore is spread throughout all of like cards and stuff like that, and snippets here and there within the game, the board games and card games themselves. So they would have had to have done a lot of research to see what's relevant. And of course, they can make things up as they go along as well. So yeah. Mike, was there anything that you found that sort of stuck out a little bit?
Well, for me, I came into it pretty well, completely unknowing of the setting.
Right.
I knew of it through their various other related games. Like, I'm not a big fantasy person. It's never done a whole lot for me.
Yeah.
But the setting is interesting in the fact they've done such a good job with its lore that you can. It's fair. It's generic enough, high fantasy, whilst being different enough. So you can, as GM Flano was just saying, it's different enough and open enough that you don't feel restricted to play within the world.
Yeah.
It gives you enough of a canvas, I guess, with a little bit of a backdrop here and there to help you paint the rest of the picture, which is really, really, really cool. And that's, I think, a very important thing for an RPG setting, because sometimes you can get too tied down to the pre-existing lore.
Like with Star Wars, as much as I love Star Wars, it's got so much history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unless you and unless the GM and the players are willing to, forego canon, which can be the case, that can happen fine. It can feel restrictive. Whilst this one gives you enough, to point you in the right direction, but not put you on nice shiny rails. Essentially,
make your own adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that's what I appreciate about the lore the most. I think that's what I take away from it the most.
Yeah. Because there's one thing that as much as I love the world of Galarian, I'm not a fan of Pathfinder generally, but the world itself I love. The problem with it is that there is so much information out there now. But because they've been, in the Galarian world for quite some time, that there is so much out there, and so GMs may feel restricted because they can't basically cover all of the. They may just feel restricted with what has happened in that area, that they may not necessarily be able to play in that sort of wheelhouse.
But I guess the important thing to take from that is from Terrinoth, if the GM, and the players are fairly new to Terrinoth, don't go out and read further lore. Stick to what's printed in the book.
Yeah,
that way you can't read something and think, oh no, now I'm suddenly tied down by this event. Because if you don't know about it, you can do whatever you want.
True.
And in your little bubble of players, the lore and canon is whatever you make of it. So if you do something in the game which you inadvertently, without realizing it, go against some other big world event that you don't know about, guess what? People at the table aren't going to know that's a problem because no one knows it's a thing to start off with.
Yeah, I mean, the same sort of thing has been spoken about with Rokugan when talking about L5R, that people have sort of said, oh, look, it can't breach this bit of history and this bit of history, and there's so much lore, and there's like 15 years of lore dedicated to L5R. And a number of people, their automatic response is, well, it's your Rokugan.
Yes. And that's why I think it's beautiful what FFG has done with that, is that they've reset the timeline.
Yep.
It's now their L5R.
True.
And they can, you don't have to go with all of that. They specifically said that.
Exactly. And the same sort of thing, as we've said, is here at Terrinoth. It is full of ideas, though, which is great, where you can steal, beg, borrow from wherever in the book. And even if you're not necessarily using Terrinoth, and I know that we've been asked a number of questions about our thoughts on Terrinoth. And it seems to be that, a lot of people are using Terrinoth in their own fantasy settings. And I know that we've done it with Night's Edge. We've used some of the weapons and things like that from Terrinoth in Night's Edge as well. So, and I think that there is definitely there's food to fuel your fantasy settings.
Well, I love that it paints the different realms in broad strokes.
Yep.
And hopefully we'll see in the future books that'll break down and give us more depth of that. But for now, it gives you the framework to build on.
Yep.
That's an interesting point. I'm really curious to see if FFG plan on expanding these, because Terrinoth was the first of their setting books, and we know that Android is next one to be out, which I'm super excited for. I'm interested, and I'm pretty sure everyone else out there who is listening is interested to see if they do supplement books for their supplement books, because I think there's lots of space for it. But what it comes down to is, does the FFG RPG department have the manpower to do everything they need to do, i.e. produce further supplement books, setting books, and then also dedicate the time and effort to write supplement books for those setting books. You're trying to keep a lot of people happy. It's tricky.
I think that they won't necessarily, and this is just speculation.
It is.
They won't necessarily keep a schedule of releases like they have with other
Star Wars.
Others like Star Wars. Yeah, you won't expect them to say put out a book for every line.
No.
On a set schedule.
True.
I think when they have a book, they'll release it.
Yeah.
When they've got something to give us. And I'm happy with that.
Oh, yeah. It'd just be interesting if they do with that, because I know Terrinoth could do with it really, really well. Like, there's lots you can expand upon, as GM Hooly was just saying, himself, Flano, that you can add to the realms that exist, expand upon, add more monsters, etc. The list goes on.
Yeah.
Android is exactly the same thing. Because Android is called Shadow of the Beanstalk, and it's set in the Android book, much how Terrinoth is set in one nation. It's the Android book set on one city in the Android universe, and there's many other big cities that you could add expansions to. There's even the moon in the Android setting, and that alone would be one fantastic setting book a supplement book for the Android setting book.
Yeah.
I think they're certainly opening the door to do that sort of stuff, but what comes out of it, as we've said, is pure speculation.
Remains to be seen.
Take notes, Sam.
Yes, Sam.
If you're listening.
And secondly, it gives me more work. Anyway, so that's fine. But yeah, so chapter 1 is pretty much all of that. It's called Tales of Darkness. So, as I said, a lot of it is done from the perspective of, I think her name's Alania of Greyhaven. She's the I think she's an elf. Off the top of my head, I can't remember.
Did you assume?
Oh, I may have assumed. Yes, that's very elfish of me. Anyway, sorry. See, that was my attempt at a pun. Anyway,
I think it was successful.
I think you just punished all the listeners for no reason.
Oh dear. All right, so then we move into chapter 2, which is called The Call to Adventure, and I think this is probably the area which gets the most use.
We will flip to as soon as we get the book.
Pretty much, and the reason for that is because it basically has all of the rules for creating player characters in the world. Yep. So all of the races, all of the careers, and all of the equipment. But probably the most important part from most people's perspective was to see how magic was going to be done in a fantasy setting. Because the core rulebooks basically give us the magic system from the framework for the system, but they wanted to see how it was applied in a setting perspective.
Well, unique magic setting too that Terrinoth is. So interesting.
So so they've really focused on that insofar as the rune shards, as well as rune magic generally, and it also gave us two new types of spells, which is obviously the runes, as well as it gave us verse. But not only that, it also gave us the rules for crafting and alchemy, which has been fairly popular as well. So yeah, let's.
Well, I'm looking at doing an alchemist for our game when we start it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's been interesting because it's something I haven't done in the narrative dice system before. So
yeah.
Well, interesting how it goes.
I'm interested in doing some sort of like brawling character, but there isn't very many brawl weapons.
No,
in
there's
this
not.
Setting.
There's not. So we have to kind of look at that. And I mean, this is the whole thing even with Player's Handbook and whatever else, even the Pathfinder core rules when they first came out. There is a lot of weapons, but it's non-exhaustive because if they do that, they're not going to be able to sell any other books.
Yep.
And Star Wars is the same. You know, when FFG first brought out the Age of the Empire, there was a certain number of
brass knuckles, and I think that's Retro Brawl. You had
exactly.
That was pretty much it. But there have been gradual releases when it goes into each one of these, career books that actually starts to expand on those sorts of equipment. So there is room for expansion as well as room for allowing people to do their own stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's the beauty about this system, Genesis in general. Like, brawling weapons might be pretty non-existent in this current book. However, I'm sure there's going to be a Genesis setting later on down the track you can just pull from. And
exactly.
The GM's approval, they go, yeah, sure, that sounds good. We know,
and we can make things up.
Well, our friend of the show, Keith Capel, he released a whole supplement about martial arts brawling and whatnot. So you could pull stuff from there and plug it straight into this with the with just the GM's approval.
Yep.
It should theoretically work perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, so let's just talk about the elephant in the room when it comes to magic.
I was curious about that elephant.
Why is it pink?
I thought it was an AT-AT.
That may be the anyway. Moving along. So magic. So what was the two types of magic that people that were presented? As I mentioned before, is the rune magic as well as the verse magic. So let's just talk about that very briefly. Martin, when it comes to verse magic, what's the big difference between verse magic and the other magics that already exist in the Genesis setting?
Mechanically, there's none.
No, that's right.
It comes down to the
how they're defined.
Well, and how you role play it, how you present it in the setting.
Yeah.
It is through song and verse that you bring changes to the world around you. You invoke that magic.
Yep. And so they've brought it in so that you can have bards.
Yep.
Which is cool. So basically, as far as the musical instruments, you don't actually need one. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, not to cast a spell, so to speak. You can just sing or, perform however you want. I want to make a mime. But no, there's an expectation that you do some sort of performance.
Yeah.
Said in the name, it's a verse.
Yeah. Yeah. But there are magical items which are really cool, which are musical instruments. So that basically, because obviously a musical instrument can be heard to a larger group of people.
Yep.
So it is, when it comes to the number of people being affected, it doesn't increase the difficulty when you're casting a spell for that. Yeah, so it's very, very cool.
And it might be worth mentioning that isn't a generic musical instrument. That's a magic implement, so a magical musical implement.
Well, in the description, it is. It's just a musical instrument used by a bard, which eventually accumulates magic over time. So
my point is you don't need to. Say if you're playing a brand spanking new character with no money, there's no reason why you couldn't have a drum or whatever like that, a generic basic drum. And when you cast your verse spells, you're narratively playing that drum or whatever generic instrument. And when you do come across and buy, in inverted commas, a musical instrument that's magical, that drum has suddenly become one of you, and now it's playing a really, really strong magical tune as you perform your verse.
So my mime wall, I can get like a special mime wall?
Well, cast a barrier spell.
Oh, that's gold. I love it. That's peachy.
But I also want to get a viol made from the special instrument, the implement material of bone, with the with the strings strung from the sinews of men.
Wow, that's really suddenly taken a dark turn, Martin.
I mean, sure, we're all into different things.
No, but this guy will he'll be a necromancer. Spooky, scary skeletons.
Wow. Interesting.
Oh, actually, no, that would be a trumpet.
But at 200 gold, or 200 whatever it is, the I think it's gold. I don't think it is. It is gold. For a musical instrument, that is probably what you'd be starting off with, I would suggest, if you're playing a bard type character.
It'd be silly not to. Unless you really want a bard and plate armor or something like that. You want to invest your money in that. There's no reason why you can't.
That is true.
Thanks to the sort of mutable way that the Genesis setting, Genesis rules, allow you to create characters. You could be that holy paladin knight character.
Yeah.
Who's actually does all his stuff through verse.
Well,
could you imagine a paladin warrior who sings as he's cleaving his foes?
I think there is a talent that it allows you to pick up verse later on down the track.
There is. Yeah, absolutely.
But something that we were talking about before as well is, unless we're wrong, I think a bard can make use of any magical implement. Is that a thing? What
do you mean? As far as there's no restriction as far as like that. that certain abilities can only be used. Obviously, it's going to be linked into a magic type. Like verse doesn't necessarily affect all of the magic actions.
A wand isn't necessarily going to help you, though, as of...
No, well, that's true.
Unless you're, conducting.
No. This is what you do, right? You get the quick draw talent.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
You have your magical implement instrument out, which in this case is going to be an acoustic guitar. Okay? And then I'm strumming away doing my verse with my guitar.
Yep.
And I hit a really killer note. I use quick draw to pull out my inverted commas wand, which is me running my hand up the neck of the guitar and blasting out a bolt of arcane energy.
Yep.
And even though there's two separate magical items, I'm narratively combining them to be one cooler thing.
Yeah, true. I mean, that's the thing that I think this setting allows, or just the system allows more for, is more that narrative sort of way of telling things rather than being so hamstrung, I guess, to an equipment list.
Yeah, which is great.
It's, and one of the things that it talks about, because I know that I asked the question before about, what is the difference between verse? There is some difference, but it's narrative difference. And there's an entire page dedicated to how verse works in Terrinoth. And there's a few of the other magic sort of types. It talks about the magic of the elves, talks about the magic of the orcs, and things like that. So, it's covering narratively these sort of options that would otherwise, in other systems perhaps, there would be a codified reason for it. So instead, by being a narrative description of how things work, it gives, again, power to the player, power to the GM, to describe how something's actually occurring. So you can do things like what Mike just said.
Absolutely. And
verse can't sling out fireballs.
No, it doesn't. But if you had, there's no reason why you can't have verse and arcane.
Yeah.
As two separate skills.
That's true.
So in one turn, I play my verse. Next turn, I do an arcane bolt.
Yeah.
It's
exactly
nothing stopping you from doing that.
As long as you've got access to that magic skill.
Which I'm pretty sure there's a couple of ways you can do it. Yeah. But I still like the idea of, a magic tome that's actually a chorus book.
Yeah.
That is very, very true.
No one can say you're tome deaf.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
If they do, you just beat them around the head with the tome anyway.
That's it.
Wow.
But yeah, we went into that in great depth in the magic episode.
Yeah, we did.
The magic is in this game, in Genesis, is so good because it comes down to however you want to paint it up as.
Yep.
Core mechanics are there. You just color it in however you like. And once you get your head around that, and I think a lot of new players, again, we've been through this, that come from other systems, are so used to magic being this is what it is. This is so codified. This is this spell. This is this. Yes, verse is a different flavor of spell.
Yep.
Again, though, it's essentially doing exactly what every other spell in the game does.
Channeling magic to achieve an effect in the world.
And how you want to portray that, it's completely up to you. You can do verse if you want to as a fairly generic thing. I'm going to strum my instrument. Or you could be this awesome glam rock gnome who's strumming a guitar made of dragon bone. It comes down to how epic you want it to be. And that just comes purely from your narrative descriptions.
Yep.
And from GMs out there, something we've gone across many times, if players get really cool and creative with their descriptions of their magic or any action they do in the game, give them a boost dice. And they'll keep coming back and they'll keep being narrative and stronger and stronger with the descriptions.
Yep.
And everyone at the table starts feeding off that. And it starts to spitball and gets going and rolling. And then all of a sudden, everyone at the table is doing this amazing thing.
And telling better stories for it as well. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I think is an important point to raise is that as opposed to some games, and I'm probably sort of pointing the finger at D&D and Pathfinder.
Well, I hate to be in D&D right now.
And there is nothing wrong with those systems, just pointing it out there. I've played all of them. I've had a lot of fun with them. But the thing is that in comparison to Genesis, it's not equipment there's not a requirement to have, level up and your equipment has to be of equal level.
Yeah.
It's more, Genesis is more about a character-focused story. And it's more about, the abilities of your characters. Yes, you can have some really cool equipment. But when it comes to Terrinoth in particular, that magic is something which there isn't a lot of because it's all hidden away because it's been left behind.
Yep. So
now it's up to the players to go out and seek adventure, effectively to find some of these magic items to equip their characters better, to enhance their abilities. But is there a requirement to do that? I don't think so.
Neat.
But yeah, the other thing as well, which is an important point, is that there are very little rules for creating magical items. There's obviously crafting for, making weapons and making your own gear. But there is very little in the way of creating your own magical items. However,
it does touch on it a little bit.
There is a single sidebar.
Yep.
Which is an important thing for people to take a look at when it talks about the crafting. So on page 112, there is a nice sidebar in the crafting section, which basically talks about crafting magical items, and it says that the power to craft magic items is something that has been kind of lost in time, or it's only available to the most powerful of mages. But it does give some guidance as to what to do. And that can honestly be based on, because that's what crafting is all about. It's the difficulty to craft something is based on its rarity. And a lot of the magic items, when it shows the rarity, they are, 8s, 9s, and 10s. Mm. So, using that, the GM might be saying, okay, well, you're directly imbuing magic into something, so there's going to be some upgrades and things like that, where things could go horribly, horribly wrong.
You also got to look in, like if you use D&D for an example, when you're crafting a magic item, there's a massive resource cost involved. You can't just pull materials out of thin air. No. So, yeah, you as a GM could not only make it difficult, you could also factor in costs as well.
Well, look, that's actually one thing that they do mention in there as well, is that they talk about that not all of the items are going to be available to be able to make these things in the first place.
Exactly.
And so the GM narratively can say, well, you're going to need this particular type of mineral, so you're going to have to go up into the mountains to deal with.
That's an entire adventure right there.
Exactly.
And specialized tools might be required, things that have not been seen in this world for generations, or, are only possessed by a certain clan of dwarves up in the mountains.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, to go use the dwarven, forge. Yep. The dwarves won't let you use the forge until you go and free their lands from some, dragon that's been plaguing them for generations. So there's an entire, just one shopping list.
Yep.
Or request list from a player or players can, if the GM's listening, can be used as a great way of building an entire adventure.
Well, and magic items in this setting are they are amazing.
Yes,
they are powerful things and unique tools. They're not. Although we got another +1 magic sword. Throw it in the bag with the others.
Chuck it in our magical bag that has infinite space inside it to store our other magical items. Because I think it's fair to say in D&D, it's expected that you literally be walking around for an arsenal of magic the most rarest things in the known world, dangling off every single character, and I dropped a magic +1 sword. Don't worry about it.
Well, going, not to rag on D&D, but the D&D game that I have joined, where we're 16th level, that I've gone, okay, so what sort of magic items do we have access to? They literally pulled out a 6-page spreadsheet, which has all of the equipment that they've basically collected. And I'm there going, I don't think you'd ever see that in Terrinoth at all.
You wouldn't.
Because it doesn't work like that at all. If you get the magic sword, you will stay with that magic sword. You won't worry about anything else.
Probably the only one you're ever going to find.
Yeah, exactly.
But as you might still record, we found a horde of weapons, we came across an armory or things like that.
Yep.
But you don't necessarily, with that, need to specify each and every sword that you get.
No.
Like you do with D&D and Pathfinder and things like that. Yeah.
I know, like, Terrinoth could be a good setting to do it in, but, like, you think of every movie movie or book that you've encountered, characters will have a trademark item or armor or something like that. So why not have the players find a really well crafted sword?
Yep.
At creation.
Yep.
When I say find, I mean they could just be buying. However, as the players go along, yes, this feeds into another topic of the book.
Yeah.
As the players go along, the weapon grows with them, and that's sort of similar to how magic items work for the bard in Terrinoth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that immediately makes that weapon far more valuable to the player and the story going on, not just another +1 sword.
Yep, true.
Now, this leads into heroic abilities.
Oh, yes. And this was kind of to me, when I first picked up this book, this was the surprise that I wasn't expecting at all.
Yeah.
That effectively it can not just be used in Terrinoth. It is something that when looking at a superhero setting,
this is how I would do it.
Yeah, it looks exactly how I would imagine a superhero ability to be.
Yep.
And yeah, as Mike just mentioned, as far as the signature item, sure, it only talks about signature weapons, but I don't think that it would be too much of a bit of work to do to make a signature item as well.
You could easily make a signature magical implement using those rules, just a little bit of changing around.
Well, before we dive too deeply into it, what are these things you're talking about?
Yes, we should explain that a little bit.
Let's explain, shall we?
Don't worry, listeners, I've got your back.
So what it was is a thing which is called heroic abilities. So what it is that at the start of the game, your character gains one heroic ability. And that can range from, there's quite a number of them, let's say we've got all the facts, connected, foretelling, hard to kill, influential, miraculous recovery, paragon, sixth sense, and signature weapon. There's also unbowed and unleashed as well. So each of these things have their own abilities. But what's really cool, and this was what was surprising, is that for every 50 XP that you get, you don't have to spend 50 XP. It's just your total goes up to 50. You can upgrade them.
Which is a great system. I much prefer that.
Absolutely,
spend the 50 XP.
Yeah. So, I'll just pick one generally, which, we talked about signature weapons. And there's an improved and there's a supreme version. So you've got the base version, then you've got improved and supreme. Very similar to the way that we see talents.
Yep.
The other thing is that for each 50 earned XP, that's earned, not spent, which is a big difference, is that you get one ability point. Now, for this ability point, it's then used to increase the potency of your heroic ability. And there's quite a number of options there that you can spend that ability point on to increase your heroic ability. Now, some of those increases, in fact, most of them, only require the spending of one ability point. Others, however, require 2 or more. So when you reach 50 XP and you gain an additional ability point, that you might spend it or you might save it. It's completely up to you. And that can be things like you can increase the duration of how long things last, how many times within a session that you can use it, because you can only use these things once a session, and it takes 2 story points to be able to activate. So it's something which is quite pivotal. One of them, I think, and we always go back to this because this is the thing that I think Madeline forgot was on her character when we did the live play, where you can automatically, I think it's unleash, that you can basically spend a couple of story points and you automatically destroy any minion group for it's. I don't think it's even an action. You basically just as
I think it's
maneuver.
It's a maneuver, yeah. So you can destroy one and pick on another. My automatic reaction to that was if you had someone like Captain America, for example, that when he's throwing his mighty shield, that you might have something like that instead. And that's the narrative description of that ability. So each time that you're using that ability, you're giving it a narrative effect, and you can explain how that heroic ability works differently for your character. Now, what that means is that you can have two completely different characters with the same heroic ability that instead execute the use of that ability totally differently. Now, to use Madeline's character from the live play as an example, her character had Unleashed, which used alchemical grenades, I think it was. Whereas a fighter, if we use the Captain America analogy, the fighter might be using a shield, which he can throw at the enemy, which has the same effect because it's obviously unleashed. So, same ability, completely different and unique applications of the same ability for two different characters. So, that's something to me which is really, really cool.
Like I can imagine Unleash, when you read it at a glance, you think it's you going into a murder frenzy. But Unleash could be your character reaching a breaking point. They scream this bellowing roar. And a minion group that they die, but they actually run away and flee into the hills because
they're defeated.
Defeated this big terrifying orc charging at them, and that's really, really that paints such a vivid picture for everyone at the table and cements your character.
Well, that's it. That's what it does. It fills out who you're like. It gives more depth to your character,
Absolutely.
and which is what you want in a system.
I don't know when the time comes for us to develop our own characters for our upcoming game. I'm probably going to look at heroic abilities first and help that sort of create a bit of a backbone for my character,
shape your character,
help define how they are. Obviously, it won't be inclusive of just that, but it'll help me. It's a part of the recipe, part of the formula, and I think it's very important for people to look at these heroic abilities as they're building their character, not just tack it on to the end. Make it a part of your character's heart and soul, and your heroic ability then becomes much more heroic.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Martin, any other thoughts?
Don't just use it as a power buff.
It's tempting to do it.
Yeah, as we've just said, the most important thing that you can get out of this is extra depth for your character, extra fuel for RP. So don't just use it as a buff. You're going to cheapen it.
Yep.
That's
and make it really cool. Make it cool. It's sort of, again, it's providing bare bones.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You can describe it how you want. Like that signature weapon, that could be your father's sword that, he passed on to you with his dying breath after he died at the hands of an ancient dragon.
And the storyteller can run with that, and it turns out that sword actually belonged to some long-forgotten king of some sort of a realm that's been long since forgotten, and you're the new heir.
Yep.
And because you hold the sword. And that sword can only can become unsheathed in your bloodline's hands. There's lots of cool things you can do with it. And you can borrow from pre-existing fantasy lore or history and folk tales. There's so much you can do with it.
I'd love to see a signature weapon that's actually a shield.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd
be really cool.
Absolutely.
And absolutely doable just with the rules as is.
And in saying that, if you can't find the signature ability you like here and adapt it to your character because you have such a cool, unique idea, and that could be signature armor that we were talking about before, it does give you a sort of a rough guideline on page 80 of how to create heroic abilities. And when I say how to, it's more of a encouragement to do it, because it's a game of mindset. I think we can all agree is to, if it's not a hard and fast rule, we can't use it. But if you're a fairly veteran group, for a good GM, sit down and create your own heroic ability.
And that's what Genesis is all about.
Exactly.
And these are the guidelines I would follow making superheroes. And I really want to do that now.
Yeah.
Why did we talk about this?
See, that's the signature weapon shield.
Yeah.
There you go. See, mix it in with Unleashed. Because that's something else that I would do as well as far as, heroic abilities.
Yep.
You would almost make it, rather than just one ability, you could do it with multiple abilities for superheroes.
You could absolutely make, just with the signature weapon, you could absolutely make Cap's shield. Like you don't need to change it at all.
No.
Yeah.
This whole party of Captain America's running.
So yeah, so cool. Was there anything that sort of stood out to you that is sort of like a must use in this game
In
terms of chapter 2?
Well, something we haven't gone across is the runes.
Ah, yes, good call.
In great detail. If you're familiar with Star Wars and the attachment system, it's very, very similar to that. It's a cool concept. You get these runes, which are quite valuable and rare. You plug them into weapons which have the available slots, and you get a cool magical buff.
This, I feel, is sort of more like your +1 magic sword.
Yeah.
In this setting. It is a little bit more that, but it is more. It's got more flavor.
It does.
Look, to me, it's a little bit. Maybe it's borrowing a little bit from places like World of Warcraft, where you've got like gem slots that go into items, and I mean that's just one that I've had dealings with, and as we explained, as we explained at the start of the episode, my my connection to computer gaming isn't all that good. But yeah, so there are plenty of other options out there for plugging in. So yeah, but no, that was cool.
And they're a really good way of giving your players, your +1 sword rewards without
cheapening magic
items. Like, and because the rules for runes are so simple, the GM can quickly and easily make up new runes very easily with very minimal effects. Like a rune can be basic as once the first round of every combat, when you use a weapon of this rune, get +2 boost dice to your attack on this particular sword. That's easy as made that in 2 seconds.
I like as well that you're not going to toss away your sword.
No, true.
When you get this, you still have your gear and your connection to that. Whereas, when you're playing in other systems, often you'll toss away your sword because you found a better one. Like there can be story attached to this. And
I love the idea of like a fairly veteran player group having like a sack of runes. And then you go, all right, we need these particular runes for this particular fight. And they spend a little bit of time preparing for the fight, break out the runes, slot them into the weapons, and off they go. It brings a bit of a sci-fi element to a fantasy element. That's why I'm not saying runes are new, but for me, that's why I really like runes, because it does bring that sort of, even though it's not sci-fi, but it has that sort of feel to it.
Hey, I mean, we sort of have something similar in Knight's Edge.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That is very, very true. Yeah.
And that's purely by coincidence too.
Yeah.
Because we designed Knight's Edge just after this, and just like within days of that, or might have even been a little bit before.
I think it was before the release, but it had been announced.
We didn't have the book, and we had done the live play using the con material. Yeah, but we hadn't.
And there's no runes in that either. So
yeah. So, but anyway, no. Really cool as far as and the other thing as well when it comes to rune magic is that you have to. That's the only one that does have a condition of having an item. You have to have a rune item to be able to do those sorts of things. But they give you special abilities as well, so that's cool.
Yeah, and they will. And if you pick the career associated with that, they give you a minor rune to start off with. Start with, yeah. And rune shard, I think, or whatever they call it.
There's something else as well that we've skipped over. Well, two things actually, and that is that their species, the player races, they now have subspecies, which is cool. So it brings a bit of diversity into the game without creating whole new stat blocks.
Yeah, true.
Great, fantastic. Love that. I think what the dwarves, gnomes, catfolk, and orcs from the top of my head.
Elves as well.
They're
yeah.
like, well, all of them almost have a subtype,
Except humans.
Except for humans, but that's human schmick, though. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, are you going to tell us, Martin, that humans are have a something as well?
but
I don't think they do.
They don't.
But I mean, they have different areas of around the world. But yeah, so I agree with you, and I think they've borrowed a little bit from Star Wars, where they've had some of their sort of subspecies, like the Aqualish was one, I think, that they have sort of the sub race. So you can basically kill two birds with one stone. So you're only using so much word count, but you're actually getting two entire species, as Mike said, which is I think that's great.
Well, you can change so much about a species by just changing its starting skills and its species ability.
Yep.
Like I'm looking here at the gnomes, and there's the burrow gnome, which has a different list of starting skills and has militia training, and then the wanderer gnome, which has a different set of starting skills. And another unique ability called Trixie. And both paint a very, very different picture to two types of gnomes.
Talking species, the one thing that I'd like to call out, which is a diversion from divergence from most settings, is the elves. And how they're not really arcane, like tied to the arcane. They're more tied to the divine.
Divine, yeah.
Because they're basically fallen from grace. If you pick the highborn elf, you actually get divine as a career skill, which is powerful beyond measure.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you were doing like an arcane caster, but you've already got divine as an ability as well. You can hit it from both angles. That's cool.
I mean, you'd be doubling up on a few things, but you'd get access to the like divine only spells, which is, or magic actions, which is really cool. And yeah, I like the idea of making a highborn like sword fighter, sword master who has divine as a
look. The one thing that I think that they missed, and it's probably got more to do with the Terrinoth setting, is that, and this is where I thought you were going when you were saying that they've diverged. Where's the hobbits? Where's the halflings?
Where are like the tengus and other birds? Because they're my favourite species and they don't exist in this book. If I can't play a crowman, then what is life?
Wow.
Easily adjusted from the catfolk.
That is...
So it's not the same.
I guess there's a whole heap of reskinning that can go on. And I mean, when we play the next campaign for Terrinoth that we're going to do, which we'll just do for our home campaign, that I'm setting it in Galarian.
Yep.
Are you still setting Galarian? Because I know you're saying you want to just leave it in Terrinoth.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem. I love halflings, though.
No, but okay. Here's my opinion on that. It's going to be, and this is, I think this was actually a question from someone that I'm answering now. But we'll touch on that later. I think it'd be 1,000 times easier to convert the story from a campaign that already exists and just set it in Terrinoth rather than having to reverse engineer all of the encounters and things like that. You just port the important story elements and set it in Terrinoth.
So you just take the beats, essentially.
Exactly. You take the story beats and then you just use what is already done.
And I mean, there's a pro to that as well. Another pro is the fact that because we're all fairly new to the Terrinoth setting ourselves, it gives us all a chance to dive into it a little bit and learn it a little bit more. Because as much as you can only learn so much of reading a book. And once you start playing it and deep diving into the lore, that's where you really start to pick up the nuances of the setting.
You're immersing yourself in the setting. Yeah, definitely.
But there's nothing wrong with doing it the other way, though. No. As long as you've got the time and the effort.
Yeah, that's something I don't. So I just should listen to my friends and do it that way. That would make so much more sense.
Well, you've run that particular adventure a couple of times now.
Yeah.
Well, then just take the story, as I said before, the story beats, and just go
and just change them.
Just take it across over to Terrinoth, and that would make
names
sense.
and places have been changed for the safety of the.
Jumping
Indeed.
back as well to the species.
Yes.
Something else that I really like about Terrinoth is the fact orcs sort of subvert the typical trope. It's not always the case, obviously, but when you read orcs, you sort of get the mindset of a fairly unintelligent, unsophisticated creature.
Yep.
They are the opposite in Terrinoth. I think World of Warcraft, the orcs aren't quite like that either. They're fairly intelligent. I'm not a big World of Warcraft fan.
Well,
so
no, yeah. In World of
I can't
Warcraft,
say.
like it changed. The lore has changed in World of Warcraft a lot, but they explained it by saying that the first ones that we ever encountered in the RTS were tainted by demons. So they were your dumb...
Right. So
Orcs,
for the longest period of time, orcs have had this sort of mentality behind them.
Yes.
The orcs here, even down to the visual appearance of them, they're a lot more human, I guess you could say.
These ones
Tribal.
are much closer to the orcs you get in World of Warcraft today.
I'm not usually a big orc fan myself. I usually steer clear of them, but I do have a bit of a shine to the orcs in Terrinoth.
They can be tribal and they can be shamanistic and they can
shamanistic, that's a
be...
good word.
they're not undeveloped. They're just closer to nature.
Yeah. Well, look, one of the orcs in, I think it was the Gen Con module that you guys didn't even encounter was there's an orc that's in there, which is a poet.
Yeah.
Cool. And you can sit down and have a chat with him, and he's a poet, and he knows it. Yes, man. So yeah, you're 100% right. They are a little bit more sophisticated than your typical, Lord of the Rings orc type thing. So yeah.
Yeah.
Which is cool. They've kind of taken the place of the half orc.
We did have an orcish style manager, right? Like, no, I'm not making this up, right? We did have that.
So the catfolk was an interesting one for me. I mean, and half catfolk, which I thought was interesting.
I think it's really good. It's a good addition. I mean, catfolk have existed everywhere. Like, especially Skyrim. Like, I love the Khajiit.
Right,
they are a great species. Like, so
and a source for many, many memes, which I also.
Khajiit has wares.
Exactly.
The you can import all of those, all of the species as well across to your fantasy setting. Across to your sci-fi setting. If you wanted to do like
give it the Shadowrun treatment.
Give it the Shadowrun treatment. Absolutely.
Look, I love that. Like, it's so
good.
It is good. Like. Basically, Warhammer 40k has essentially done that. Like,
but
with its own changes, though.
The beauty about Genesis being is the genius behind it is that it's all interchangeable.
Exactly.
When Shadow of the Beanstalk comes out, if you wanted to run your own Shadowrun or something similar,
Bright,
yep.
Martin? You can't see it, but I hurt GM Huzz then, like right in the gut.
Yes. Mike doesn't like Bright.
I don't. I never hated Will Smith so much in my life.
Wow. Sorry, Will Smith, if you're listening.
Will Smith, if you're listening, what are you thinking, dude? Come on. You can't be scraping the barrel for that much. How much do they pay you?
Have the movie defenders defended that movie yet?
They have, actually.
I'll have to go and listen to
They
that.
also defended Terminator Genesis, so I can never, ever forgive them.
So, yes, if you're listening, Scott and Donald.
There's no defending that movie. I know I said that for Valerian.
Right. Yes.
But I was only half serious.
See, GM Huzz, he gets passionate about these things.
When it comes to Terminator, absolutely. But anyway, moving along.
What was I saying? The hate.
I sort of combining, hopefully, the Android setting and this.
Yeah.
Easy peasy, done and dusted. And
look, I would play that. Yeah. And it is so simple to do.
Take the talents and magic from this and drop it straight into Shadows of the Beanstalk.
Yep.
It's all universal. It'll work. It's so cool that you can use all of Shadows of the Beanstalk's net running rules alongside all your cool magic rules. It's just mind-blowing. And And I don't think people are going to really appreciate how awesome that is until they have both those nice, shiny setting books sitting next to each other on the table. And they go, wait, we can do this very easily with no work at all. The GM just says, hey, we're playing Shadows of the Beanstalk. But guess what? You can bring along your Terrinoth book as well.
Yeah.
And
That would be cool.
Amazing. Using heroic abilities from your Terrinoth book in Shadow of the Beanstalk.
Yep, I could see that.
This is, yes, I know.
My signature weapon happens to be...
I know what my next campaign is.
My signature weapon happens to be this railgun.
Yes.
That's convenient.
Oh, God.
That's insane. Yeah. Oh, dear. So after species, then we take a quick journey into careers, which is kind of cool. Obviously, careers, it's not a big thing in Genesis generally, because it's just basically, here are the 8 skills that you can choose and choose 4 of them. The thing which they added in Terrinoth, which I think is fantastic, is that they've said, right, these are your skills, but this is your starting gear as well.
Yeah,
so they've kind of given a starting gear package so that you can go out and just, plug and play for,
It makes character creation a lot quicker.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like when you build a character, it's like you get through the part where you work your numbers and attributes and everything out. Then you go, now I have to do my gear. And that can often be the most time-consuming part because you have to flip back and forwards through pages.
Analysis paralysis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If there's a GM, we'll just go, okay, bam, make a character in 10 minutes. Here's your starting gear. And if you start with a dagger, but you want something of equivalent value, I'm sure the GM won't mind you just swapping it out if you know what that is.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you're just swapping the dagger out to be different, then you're probably just being difficult.
But yeah, so it does make it so much simpler.
Or you wait until you hit gameplay and sell the dagger and buy what you want.
This is true. This is true. And that may breed another adventure that, as you're trying to sell this dagger. Oh,
just quietly.
Why would you want to sell this dagger? It's got this inscription on it.
Turns out it's your signature weapon.
Speaking of careers, did you see on page 73 that awesome picture of the Orc Ranger Barbarian?
I did. Would that be your favourite?
It's not my favourite, but
okay.
It's got all the right attributes.
Yes. Mike, you're such a male.
Yes. I'm talking about the bow.
Of course you are. Of course you are. There you go. But anyway, there's some fantastic artwork just generally in this book. So, and I think that draws inspiration when you're designing adventures as well as coming up with character ideas and concepts too.
Speaking of artwork, did we want to quickly announce our favourites?
Sure.
Since we happen to be on the topic.
Absolutely. That sounds like a plan. So,
sort of a commercial break.
A commercial break as such? Yeah. So, I would like to suggest that my favourite piece of art was the Molten Earth on page 193. I know that it's really, really quite simple, but that just, I don't know, just looking at it, it is basically like a wave of magma that is suddenly frozen in time.
It's a magma.
Red hot magma. So it looks as though it's, I don't know whether it's come from like a magical source or whether it's come from, an exploding volcano, or maybe it's come from an elemental or something like that. I don't know, but it's just an absolutely beautiful piece of art.
I reckon the fluff description here would probably spell it out.
Possibly.
There's a lot of it there.
There is, but
which is cool. Which is the best.
But no, it's a beautiful piece of art. That was my favourite.
That's cool.
What was your favourite, Mike?
Probably the Rue Steps. I think it's pronounced Rue. It's R-U. I'm going to go ahead and say Rue.
Yep.
Rue Steps on page 208 to 209. It's a 2-page spread.
That's the one that it's got like a bit of an orcish sort of look to it.
Yeah, it's got a real sort of sinister, like Badlands sort of look to it. And I think I love those sharp angles and etc. It looks, and the artwork, the colors are great. That red and orange color set, it's really, really stands out to me.
They're like the demon worshipping. What are they called? the Uthokyan. I think that's, or are they undead? I can't remember. But they. I think they are the demons. Come to think of it. But anyway, yes, they are the demons.
That sort of skeletal structure in all the buildings with the red canvassing pulled taut over it. Looks very dark eldery from 40k as well, and the dark elf sort of influence to it as well. I really appreciate it.
I think it's a bit of a mix of Witches of Dathomir and that as well. So they've certainly, that's where they've grabbed the inspiration from. But the miniatures in that particular faction are absolutely beautiful.
So I keep looking at the game and I go, it looks so cool, but at the same time it's just a rank and file fantasy game.
The miniatures are beautiful.
Yeah, I know, it's tough. If they released a skirmish game using the miniatures, I'd probably be all over it. But as soon as you say rank and file, it's just like, I've got to paint 2 million models. I'd rather not.
But yeah, so, that's something as well, is that if you have started using miniatures in your fantasy or in your Genesis games, that there's heaps of miniatures choices, not just with Rune Wars, but obviously you've got Descent as well.
Descent does come with lots of cool monsters and gribblies. And if you're savvy, you could probably pick up a first edition copy of the box for very, very cheap.
Yeah.
And just use the cards for, if you're a visual sort of play group and you like to use tiles and maps, you could use all the card layouts and everything to create your dungeons and floor plans.
Yeah.
And, of course, all the miniatures. The good thing about old editions of board games, they often have a very, very low resale value.
Yeah.
So if you hunt around and put up a wanted to buy somewhere, I reckon you probably pick it up for about 50 or so bucks.
Yep.
I know I have a first edition box set of Descent.
Oh, really? There you go.
I think I've cracked open like once.
Wow.
So,
okay.
We should fix that.
We should fix that because that's really, really cool. Heaps of expansions as well, which was, one of them which I was quite surprised at is Lady Pharaoh. If you remember her from she was the vampire. Spoilers. For those who haven't played the Gen Con module, which is downloadable from the FFG website under the Terrinoth rules. So, Lady Pharaoh, she's a character, individual character that you can buy for Descent as well. It's very, very cool.
So about you, Martin, what's your favourite artwork?
My favourite artwork, I think, is the 2-page spread on page 22 and 23.
Oh, going to the front of the book.
It's basically like paneling of
that is very cool.
what do you call it? Stained glass.
Yes.
And I love the aesthetic of it, and it to me it speaks of what Terrinoth is. So
That
is really nice.
It's a cool art style to do because what it's doing is it's telling you a story in how the world would be told the story.
Yeah.
So if you're just a person living in the Terrinoth world, just glancing at that artwork, you know immediately these are obviously big key events that have happened because they've been rendered in stained glass.
Yeah.
Someone's taken the time and effort to put these big historical events down forever on glass. And from an artistic perspective, such a cool design choice to do that.
yeah,
It's amazing.
And that does continue on throughout that entire section of the
it
book.
does, and
which adds to that aesthetic as well.
and I love all of them, but I had to pick one. So.
I think if I had to pick one of those, like stained glass samples, it would probably be the one on page 33.
Yep.
It's fairly grim, but it quite clearly, like I haven't read that deep on the fluff on this page,
Yep.
but I can quite clearly see that's obviously a very prominent scene in history where there's 4 men being hung and a king overlooking the hanging. Now that says they're quite clearly, again, if they've been rendered in stained glass, they must have been some pretty annoying individuals.
I want to find out now. I have to read that.
Exactly. That merely makes you want to read more into that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because it's historic.
I love it. Yeah.
But there's a whole heap of different images there which tell the story, and the other thing as well. And hats off to FFG again for the writers that they have. Well, again, I don't know why I'm in that boat, but the writing quality that is there for the the storyteller who is telling the version of history. Through each of the sections, they have it's almost a handwriting type font. It's just having a read through some of that. It really gives you a good in-depth view of what it's like in Terrinoth from an individual's perspective. So yeah, it's not just the artwork that's fantastic. It's also the writing, which is quite creative and quite well done as well. So hats off to whoever the writer is for that. Hopefully one of the Tims will be able to tell us that when we have them on the podcast soon to discuss the rest of the setting. So is there anything about Chapter 2 that we haven't sort of covered? That I know that we haven't covered alchemy.
Well, alchemy and something small and simple is the crafting materials. The type of material that weapons and armor are forged from.
Yes.
And the blanket passive rules that they grant any weapon or armor. How it works is, if you haven't read it, is you buy the sword, buy the armor or whichever, then if you have access to it, when you're making the purchase of that piece of equipment, you announce that it's going to be made of this particular material.
Right.
And forever, that item is made from that material and always has those benefits. Fantastic system. And ironically, it was a very similar system to something I put into the GM Huzz's Armory for melee weapons. I gave a template system to melee weapons.
Right.
And I'm not saying it's the same, but it's a similar sort of concept.
It would have been being created around the same time. Yeah.
It's cool because it allows you to import a very similar system to other settings. So if you're playing in another fantasy setting and you create some really crazy, strange, unique material.
Or sci-fi.
I know when working on the Knight's Edge stuff, I added shade-touched material.
Yep.
So you can buy a sword that's shade-touched and it can only be used by shade-touched individuals and it has all these benefits, i.e. the sword can basically just melt down into shadow and go into the shade-touched person's body. So they carry the sword in their self. And all I did was basically transplanted the material rules from Terrinoth, change them, tweak them for my own setting or for our own setting. And it's such a fabulous concept and you can do so much with it. And, and as an equipment guy, I really, really dig that. I think it's amazing.
Yeah. It's very, very simple. And I think it just increases it or you multiply the total cost by whatever it is or something like that.
On the material, yeah. And what it does, very cleverly, it expands the equipment list without expanding the equipment list. There's a big difference between a dwarven plate mail to elvish plate mail.
Yeah.
And you're changing none of the core stats, but you are adding some cool passive rules. It's sort of similar vein of how they did the races. You have the one core race, nothing changes, but there is all these sub races which change little parts of it. And that's a very similar principle to what the item material does as well.
So we've also got the alchemy rules, as I mentioned. Alchemy it's really, really simple, and I love the way that they've done it. They've done it, it's quite elegant. They've just provided a whole heap of different types of potions and elixirs, and they've said, right, if you want to make it, you look at the rarity, halve it, rounding up, and that's the difficulty to create it, boom, done.
Yep.
It's amazing. It does basically give some examples of what's actually required to make it. So the GM can then use that to say, well, look, if you want this particular item, it's only available in this meadow that you've got to go and, take the flowers from. Well, that's another adventure.
Yep.
And
creating new alchemical items and things like that is super easy in that because you just make it up. And
yep, exactly right. And then the GM basically says, right, well, this is what the rarity is going to be. And you can sort of start to build in the same sort of way that we've spoken about before when it comes to you can write up spell lists.
Yep.
Even though that, there's no such thing in Genesis and Terrinoth. You can just write up a little, this is your recipe for a spell. In this case, it's a recipe for a potion.
Yep.
This is what its difficulty is. So when you need to resupply, you need to just basically make your check and Bob's your uncle.
It'd be really cool as playing an alchemist to have like a little notebook that you write down all of the ingredients that you need, and
Yes.
That's it. The on page 114, it suggests, as what Marn just said, you create your own other potions and you use the pre-existing ones as a rough and ready guide.
Exactly.
And then you tweak those pre-existing ones slightly, rename them, change your effects slightly, warm your GM up to alchemy if he's new to it.
Yep.
And then as the campaign goes on, start getting pretty spicy with the alchemy and start making some cool things. You could even sit down with your GM and somehow work out a way to bottle magic.
Yeah.
So you do an alchemy check using the magic rules, and in some way, shape, or form, this would require a bit of back and forwards with your GM.
Yep.
Like the alchemists from Pathfinder.
Exactly. You create a spell and put it in a bottle.
Yep.
And when you drink that bottle or whatever, you hand that bottle to someone else, you effectively cast that spell.
Yep.
Interesting way you could do it as well.
Well, I mean, you can create healing potions. There's no reason why you can't create, bottled lightning.
That's it.
Yeah.
Or
Like
throw
in
that
the Night's Edge.
or throw that. You've created a firebomb. Throw that firebomb grenade. It's so much you can do with it.
Yeah.
I know. When I make my alchemist, I'm going to get creative.
That'll be cool. I was kind of liking it. But it also gives the examples of spending advantages, triumphs, threats, and despairs as well. A nice little table to give you some ideas.
Yep.
And also has the same sort of thing for crafting as well. So it's got both, which is cool. So the other thing which I think is vitally important that I think is available somewhere on our Facebook page, which was just a reprint effectively by one of our fans, was the chart which is on page 115. The one that's on 115 basically is all of the magic skills and all of the magic actions in a table.
I love it.
Which was not in the core rulebook, but is definitely in this book. And that makes it so much easier. And as a magic user or anyone who utilizes magic, you just basically have that to one side. So you've got a quick reference of exactly what you can and what you can't cast.
Yep.
So it's very, very cool. So, yeah. So that is chapter 2. We could probably go into that in more depth within each specific topic at a later stage, and there's a lot to cover.
There's a lot to go into it, and honestly, buy the book yourself and read it.
Exactly. It is true.
But we've covered the most important parts, I think, for you as a player.
Yeah, to sell the product, for want of a better term. Not that we're getting paid anything from FFG to talk about this. We just think that it's a great product, and if you really want to go out and buy it, they're the highlights.
We say that
go and
as
take a
we
look at.
record from the back of our private yachts.
Wait a minute. Why didn't I get a private yacht?
Oh, well,
There's a reason why we got bigger cuts.
So we've talked about chapter 1, which is basically talking about the world and the history of Mennara. We've then got chapter 2, which is, all the tools that you need to create characters and run a campaign. Mm-hmm. But then we've got probably the most interesting from the GM's perspective, which is chapter 3, which is the Lands of Magic. We won't go into an in-depth look because obviously we don't want to turn ourselves into a 6-hour podcast.
This is a big chapter.
It is a huge chapter. Somebody described this to me the other day as this is the Atlas of Terrinoth. It covers all of Terrinoth. It covers the lands which are adjacent to it, below it. It covers pretty much everything, and a little bit unique and a little bit annoying as well, which we'll get to in a moment. But it gives you the idea of a particular area, and then adjacent or towards the end of that, it then gives a whole heap of adversaries and creatures that can be used within that area. Some of the monsters can obviously just be reskinned to be something else, like I think there's an earth elemental, can quite easily be turned into an air elemental without too much work. And that's scattered throughout each of the sections.
They're just numbers on a page, so you can just rename them to anything you want.
Exactly. The only annoying thing, and I think you guys would probably agree with me here, is that there is no sort of rhyme or reason as far as where they're placed, and an index specifically just for the monsters themselves if you're after a quick reference.
So it's really good from a perspective of someone who might know the world, because you can easily find monsters, you know, where they come from, so you can look at that. But to someone new to the game, and
it's if you not even if you're new to the game, if you're sitting at the table, and you need to quickly find a stat block.
Yep.
You have to flip through back and forward through several sections of the book, just to find a stat block, and which isn't too bad if you're fighting a certain creature that inhabits a certain territory. So that's how they're laid out in the book. The creature lives in its territory in the book, essentially. However, the drawback to that is if you're reskinning a monster for one section and transplanting it to another area your characters are in, you have to, if you're doing this on the fly especially, you need to flip back and forwards between several pages to get those stat blocks.
We spent like an hour trying to find the dragon.
And that comes down to a glossary that doesn't really highlight the monsters overly well either. It really is tricky to find your stuff on the fly, especially if you're just opening the book for the first time or haven't prepared for that particular creature.
Now, there's a couple of ways around this.
Yes.
There is.
They have provided handy-dandy cards.
They have.
Which outline all of the monsters, and I love this in Star Wars, and I love it here. But the other easy way to get around it is to get out your Post-it notes and bookmark your book. Like,
get those little page tabs.
Page tabs are better, and just make notes as to what monsters you're using. And
honestly, it's a love-hate relationship for me. How they have these monsters laid out in the book. I love the fact they are laid out in their fluffy regions, not just.
I do like that.
They're not just in boring alphabetical order, like D&D monster manual is. You actually get a bit of fluff and substance and lore immediately when you open that section.
It brings me back to like the second ed AD&D monster manual,
right?
Where you had like an ecology of the monster and stuff like that. There was a little bit more about the monster. Or in the Dragon magazines, they would have entries, ecologies. That was great. I loved that, and this reminds me of that. It does a little bit of that. So,
if you take the practical side of it out of the equation, awesome format. If you take the practical side of the equation, pain in the ass format. But if you own the cards or tab the pages, you can get around it. And the cards aren't expensive. Get them because they will just make role-playing as the GM an absolute dream. And you can just suddenly port them into Star Wars or any other Genesis setting that you have to be playing in. Oh, look, we're in a Wild West setting and all of a sudden a dragon shows up. Players weren't expecting that, but it's possible to happen. And
it's a UFO.
Well, it could be a UFO, or it could actually be a dragon. You know, you could do some crazy stuff with it, and that's the beauty about the cards. You don't need a big stack of books next to you to use those resources.
I mean, I'd swear by those adversary cards. As soon as they said they were coming out, I had them pre-ordered. Well, because they're just. I know that they're really hard to find in Australia. FFG, if you're listening, they're really hard to find in Australia. But I ordered mine directly from FFG. And thanks to Caitlin, because she had it shipped to her, and then they sent a whole heap of other stuff off as well. No, if you've got access to it and you're wanting to run Terrinoth or you're wanting to run any sort of fantasy setting using Genesis, go out and buy those cards.
They're good.
They are absolutely. They're only like for Australian, I think they work out to be about $15 each.
A pack, not each.
A pack, no. No. So
they're not EA cards.
Yeah, but they're only about $8, I think, US anyway. And they make your life so much easier. So you don't have to book dive every opportunity. In saying that,
I'm picking on Terrinoth a little bit and how it has his monsters laid out. But if I didn't have those cards in Star Wars, it'd be a equal amount of pain to find a stat block in Star Wars because it's spread out across 30 million books. And I need all my books on the table next to me to run one encounter if I didn't have those cards. So.
Another good reason to get these cards. They have some excellent artwork on them for each and every monster.
Yeah, you can see this is what turns up.
This
You go,
is what it
holy
looks like.
dooly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that isn't... The book doesn't have every monster
No.
with artwork. This gives you an idea of what it looks like in-game.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Speaking of monsters, do we have a favourite monster? Well, we as in individuals?
Well, my favourite monster, before we go into that very quickly, one of the things that I really like about the system as well that they've provided is that when it comes to designing your own monsters, they've got all of these additional abilities as well that you can pull from one monster and just create, attach it to a new one. And I mean, ultimately, as you mentioned before, Mike, it's just numbers. Mm-hmm. So, you can just put that in and so you want to have a ghost. There's no rules, I don't think. Well, I think actually there is a ghost in there. I think it's
You want a spooky ghost.
Yeah, you want a spooky ghost.
The spookiest ghost.
So you have Incorporeal, and you basically can pull that across from the Wraith character and things like that. So as far as my favourite monster, I've gone really small fry. I love minions.
That's not a monster, dude.
No, I know.
It's more fry.
Minions, in my opinion, are the best thing in this game. They make life so much easier. You can make it look like there's a lot of things going on, but it makes so much less of an impact as far as a GM goes, as far as time, to have all of these billions of minions. My favourite is the kobold. I love kobolds anyway. But my favourite is the kobold from this, predominantly for one ability, and that is not another. So basically what it says, in an encounter with a member of the kobolds, the GM may spend 2 threat from any check made by a PC to add 1 kobold to an existing minion group, or spend a despair to add a new minion group of 3 kobolds to the encounter.
Mm-hmm. That's actually terrifying.
I know. I love it. I think that it's absolutely fantastic. And look, you can reskin kobolds to be goblins.
Yep.
They're the same sort of thing as thugs from Star Wars. You can just basically, street toughs, I think, is another one. You can just reskin it because the PCs don't know. The same sort of thing, You've and it's very, very simple, very cool. That's my favorite. Mike,
mine would probably have to be the True Fae on page 181.
ooh,
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
The fluff's cool. The fact that the Fae in this setting aren't to be trifled with. They are evil, little. Well, not necessarily little, but evil, pretty horrendous, nightmarish beings.
right?
Which is cool. However, I haven't really read the stat block. If you want me to like something, give me really nice art, and that's what happened. So,
I'll tell you, the stat block is scary.
oh, it really is. I've glanced through it, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably pretty scary. But then I look at the art, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sold.
Yeah, same.
The art's very cool. If you haven't seen it, it's basically a humanoid-shaped pixie thing, but has demonic wings and pale purple skin and no eyes, and looks very, very cool. And that's probably why it stands out to me the most as my favorite creature.
Look, if I was almost going to pick that one.
Well, lucky you did.
No, I'm going to be very boring, and I'm going to say that my favorite is the Ancient Dragon.
Right.
The quintessential, monster of fantasy.
Yeah.
And their portrayal of the dragon in this is more unique in a way to what you see in traditional fantasy, where you've got all the different colors and things like that.
Yeah.
They're also very powerful spellcasters.
Yes.
It's I don't know. I like it, and I love the artwork for them.
Yep.
And I want to see one on the table.
Because the front cover one, is that a true dragon? I'm assuming it is.
I believe yes, it
absolutely,
is.
You have it on the front cover, obviously clinging to the crumbling tower, which is very cool. Then you turn 2 pages in, just past the page spread of the world map.
Yep.
There is actually a full art version of the front cover.
Yeah.
Which was going to be one of my picks, but I thought I should,
spread your picks out.
spread my picks out.
Yeah, it's actually quite cool as well. Like, I love dragons, don't get me wrong. And, it's very cool.
Yeah. Look, the other thing as well that is important to mention is that with the cards as well as in the book itself, is that the creatures that do have access to magic, that it gives some examples similar to what we were talking about before as far as having a recipe for a spell, that it has the spell and it's named the spell. And that's what we're talking about. If you're taking a look at the rulebook, if you hear us mention, a recipe for a spell and you go, well, what does that actually look like? That's what that looks like. So that it said, right, this is exactly what it does, and this is the difficulty, and this is the skill that it uses. Boom. Done. And it's, I really, really like that. And it's on the cards as well. Yep. So it means that it's, chances are you're probably only going to use the abilities, 2 or 3 times in the game anyway when you're fighting adversaries. Mm-hmm. So why have it's got all of these spells similar to other systems, and so you've got to go and research all of these particular spells? It's just, this is what it does. So, yeah. Very good.
It's excellent.
So, would we recommend everybody go out and buy this book, Terrinoth?
Absolutely.
I would agree. It's really, really nice. It's not that expensive. You can actually get it in PDF format if you don't want to get the, the Dead Tree version.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, we should point it out really quickly too. If you haven't picked up and held the book or flipped through it, it's actually the same size as the Genesis rule.
Yes.
It's actually quite a thick tome. When you, in your mind, you often picture supplement books as 90 or so pages.
Yep.
This thing is not. It's because it doesn't need a full rule section and etc.
Yeah.
It's crammed with just mostly fluff.
Which is great.
And so if you're a complete newcomer to Terrinoth, you can just pick it up and read it from front to back and then become quite knowledgeable in Terrinoth, which is great.
Absolutely.
Perfect role-playing game.
Yeah. So, go out. Take a look at that book. Love it like we do. Now, obviously, there's going to be a whole heap of questions, and we've put the call out, and we're going to get through some of them. But we will be doing in the not too distant future a part 2 of our deep dive into Terrinoth.
Let's not call it a part 2. Let's call it a follow-up.
We'll call it a follow-up.
Because part 2 implies not finishing this one.
Right. That is true. This is kind of our version of, what did we think about the book? Yeah. So that people can, get... hear what we think about the setting and what we think about what's in the book itself.
Yep.
So definitely go out, listen to our follow-up episode where we'll be talking to the developers, and we'll be asking them a whole heap of questions about Terrinoth, and where things go in the future and things like that. Typical FFG, they will basically say they can't comment on anything that's that hasn't been released yet. But
who knows?
Who knows? So keep the questions in mind because we'll be going and asking for everyone to post us some questions about the setting. That kind of brings us to the end of that segment. So now I think that we should answer a few questions. What do you think, Martin?
I think that's a good idea, and we should call that something special.
What should we call that, Mike?
Question time. 3 bearded
Not
gentlemen.
playing along. Play the game, Mike.
That's not what it's called.
Let's just call it, I don't know, Behind the Screens.
Yes.
If you want to.
Behind the Screens. And welcome to Behind the Screens, where we, the hosts of the show, will answer your games and rules questions regarding the Genesis role-playing game. Now, this week, we're going to go through just some of the questions regarding Terrinoth. We're going to keep it in theme. There were quite a number that popped up when we put out the short call to ask about Terrinoth. So we'll go through them one at a time, see how many we can get through. If it's a really long question, or if it's a really sort of open-ended question, like, tell us how magic works. That would take us forever.
Well, and we have done an episode on that.
We
Two
have.
episodes in that.
That's true.
One was 3 hours. Go and
So-
take a listen to that.
So we'll have to, because of time restrictions and things
Obviously.
like that as well, we'll
Yep.
have to pick and choose a little bit.
Absolutely.
So I think we'll start with a question by Christopher Hickman, which is, how hard is it to adapt stories from other fantasy settings? Now, we did touch on this a little bit earlier,
Yep,
which
yep.
which is why I think it's a great place to start.
Yep.
And you've had a bit of experience with this.
I have. So how hard is it? Okay, so it's not hard at all until such time as you get to a unique monster that doesn't necessarily, that you can pull directly out of the book. However, it is not hard to do. You can just basically use some of them as sort of like a basis, as I mentioned before with kobolds. Kobolds can be quite easily goblins. And, you know, there is a goblin shaman, which is mentioned in the rules, and the stat block is provided. So you can just take some of those abilities and take some of the abilities away from the kobold. And to be honest, the kobold doesn't have all that many abilities anyway.
Yeah.
But if you were doing something like Pathfinder, for example, you might use the stats for the kobold as opposed to the goblin stats.
Yep.
In place of a Pathfinder goblin, for example.
Exactly.
For Legacy Fire, I've used Pugwampies, which are an absolute pain and everybody hates them. But they're super easy to kill. So I used kobolds as a base and just sort of brought things down and gave them special abilities and things like that. And I mean, ultimately, you're not going to know until you actually play test it. So, you know, you have to if you've got a bit of an eye for it, you can. But generally speaking, I'm kind of in agreement with you guys that it's easier, obviously and logically, to just play in Terrinoth. But if you want to grab some of the stats and the stories that are coming from Terrinoth and putting it into your own setting, absolutely you can do that with a little bit of work.
Yeah, and I think that bringing the story over from a pre-established setting to Terrinoth is going to be your easiest part.
Yeah.
The accompanying stats, as GM Hooly says, is going to be your hard part. And I thoroughly advocate making your life easy. And if you don't have to follow it exactly, it's your story now.
That is true.
You don't have to have the fight with the Pugwampies, Ian. I think it should be there.
Yes.
Knowing exactly what's happening there.
Right, yeah.
But yes, if it is something that is if it's going to be a barrier to you bringing the story to life and to the table,
Yep.
don't let it be.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also, keep in mind as well, this is, devil's advocate here, that a lot of adventures you might be borrowing from, and I assume that's going to be D&D and Pathfinder on the most part, those are going to be written in such a way where there's a lot of combat. And there's also going to be a lot of almost on-rail moments if they are coming from a pre-written module. The thing about Genesis is be prepared for the story to go away from those rails. Because of those modules, especially like the little compact ones, which are only a few pages, they're not really designed and flexible enough to take you in multiple ways. Now, this is general advice, not just related to Terrinoth. So you have to be ready as well to probably be doing a lot more combats than Terrinoth or Genesis is really designed for, because it is meant to be more of a narrative game.
Yep.
So if you find yourself looking at flipping through a adventure module where it has just room after room of fights, try and streamline it. See what needs to be an actual encounter and what you could do narratively.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could be then turning your games of Genesis, Terrinoth, in this case, into a dungeon crawl. And in that case, you may be better off sticking to a system more better suited for a dungeon crawl.
Yeah, true.
So that's it's a bit of a sort of a
I
go with caution, I guess.
I think it can do it.
Absolutely. Anything's adaptable, but just keep in mind that, as I said, those modules are written with that dungeon crawling aspect in mind.
Yeah. But that's it. You can change it how you need to in order to make it work.
Yep.
Don't feel that you have to be 100% true to what has been written before. It is your story.
Use the beats.
Ultimately. Yeah.
Because that's actually the issue that I found with Legacy of Fire, is that it is a part of an AP. Well, it is an AP.
Yeah.
An adventure path for those people who don't know what an AP is. And it can be very, very linear. And so you do have to go, am I just going to just completely disregard that and use the start of it as a basis for the story? And just run with it from that. And if things just happen to go along the right path, apply all the rules that we've spoken about with adventure design. If you want something monumental to happen, or if you want a particular event to occur, don't attach it to a place. There's one particular place which plays a pivotal role in the first episode. Or the first chapter. So move it from there. If the PCs decide to go off in another direction, well, it just happens to be in the direction that they're going.
Well,
that sort of stuff that you just apply your general rule of thumb there.
You could be better off reading through the adventure, get those beats, like I said, or just read the adventure synopsis, the summary.
Yeah,
because
you could just use that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm learning this myself because I have not done it for Genesis before, but I'm running Dark Heresy at the moment. I'm running a pre-written module for Dark Heresy. Back when Dark Heresy was brand new from FFG, back in the mid 2000s, and I've basically done just that. I've read through the adventure. I know the beats of it, and I know the summary of the adventure, but that's all I'm sticking to.
Yeah,
I'm using it as a guideline, and the players are then adding new stuff to it all the time.
Yeah.
And because I'm not adhering to the play-by-plays of the adventure, I'm not having to stress about, keeping my players on track. So long as I know the story and what the end goal is, and I can then, the players can take whatever path they like, and I can shape the story to fit whatever path they take.
Yeah.
As soon as you go, well, they're not following this prescripted path, what am I going to do? You're going to start stressing as a GM, and then things are going to go awry.
And believe it or not, that is the main reason why I decided to go over to Star Wars in the first place, is because I was so used to that Pathfinder mentality that, the adventure path mentality, not just Pathfinder generally, but the adventure path, where I would stick to, and if I went outside of that, and this is where I learned quickly as a GM, similar to what you just said there, Mike, is that, you go outside of that realm and you suddenly go, what am I going to do?
It's because you feel obligated to bring it back to the rails or the storyline, and you stress over it.
Yep.
And it's artificial self-created stress.
Yep.
It really is. But in saying that, if you go off the rails in Pathfinder and all your hardcore pre-built combats aren't applicable anymore, you suddenly go, well, what do I do? Because I can't tell the players to sit back and chill for 3 hours while I build another combat.
Yeah.
But if you don't tie those combats to a place, like
that's
you said
right.
before, then you could go, well, that dragon you were supposed to fight in that cave, well, it looks like you're now fighting that in a meadow.
Yeah.
Don't tie it to a place.
No, exactly.
That's huge.
Again, goes back to rule of thumb. We need to do that at some point. So, right, I think hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. Yes, it's easy, but.
It's kind of like this system, really. It's a yes, but.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't follow one for one.
True. Martin, what's our next question?
We have a question from Samuel West regarding necromancers. He says, do you think you should hide a player trying to be a necromancer from the rest of the party? So just while you guys have been talking there, I've had a quick look at necromancy in the Terrinoth book, which is on page 168. And it's a pretty dark art.
Because that's something actually that we didn't talk about with regards to skills, because some of the skills are a little bit different in this system in comparison to say Star Wars. That heavy weapons, for example, not heavy weapons, melee weapons are classed into heavy and light, but range is just the one range. There's no ranged heavy, ranged light. The other thing that they also have as well is obviously they've included alchemy. Now, as far as knowledge skills go, there is adventuring, which is an intellect skill, forbidden, which is an intellect skill, and that's what we're talking about. We've then got geography, which is another intellect skill. Obviously, all of these are intellect skills. And then the last one is law. So law is normally what they use to, or some spells could obviously be used with law to do additional damage. I can't remember exactly which one it is. But forbidden can be used instead of law when you've got a certain talent.
Well, and the way necromancy works from a mechanical standpoint is basically it's just regular magic. You just, the effect that you're describing is going to be that of a necromantic nature.
Sure.
Necromantic?
Necromantic?
Yeah.
Whatever.
But
Potatoes, potatoes.
But those narrative effects you describe, if they should influence the world, and then they could have follow-on repercussions.
It does, because it does say death magic in games, and so anything that would fit the definition of death magic in your game carries with it a lot of negative connotations. So people aren't going to react to you very well. There are entire factions that basically try to stamp out the knowledge of necromancy. There is a character known as the Undying One who is absolutely terrible. Like, he was the first undead, the rise of true necromancy, and so you don't want to come across him, not unless you want to be, one of his minions. But in this case, death magic is purely just flavor.
So in Genesis, there's a lot of spells which key with knowledge
law.
Yep. And in Terrinoth, is knowledge law in Terrinoth?
It's knowledge law, yeah.
Now, there is a talent in Terrinoth which allows you to tie it to knowledge forbidden. So if you are playing that type of dark arts type caster, probably a good talent for you to pick up.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a couple of them. One of them is Dark Insight, and it's just a tier 1, and it allows you to, if there is a mechanical benefit from law, you can instead use knowledge forbidden instead,
Which is cool.
And then it goes into blood sacrifice, which is a tier 2. And there's a couple of other ones as well.
That's cool.
Which is kind of the mechanical representation of what Martin's talking about, which is, your dark arts and things like that. So, but again, there will be a narrative reason not to do that. But those that do will obviously expect to be in all sorts of problems.
Well, yes, there's a couple of things that happen to a player that delves too deeply into these arts. First, there should be the obvious repercussions because people hate death magic.
Yep.
But then also you actually start to twist your own soul and your body. And it.
Well, the thing is, the listener's question is,
This is it.
Should the player conceal that from the group? Now, when you are speaking in twisted dark tongues to summon grasping black tendrils from the earth,
it might be
pretty
hard.
sure people are going to notice what's going on. That is the problem with this system, because it doesn't really define what's happening in this. I take that back. It's not a problem. It's one of the. It's a bit of a feedback from this system because it doesn't define what a spell's doing. Players can sometimes, and the GMs alike, can sometimes think that a spell is just happening and there's no effect of it. But if someone's casting dark magics, there's going to be dark effects occurring. And I don't know how a player could conceal that from the other characters, or a character could conceal that from other characters.
Well, when you're working that closely together, it might be difficult. Dark magic users do conceal themselves in the world, and even your butcher down the road could be one.
But he's not often practicing it around his
Exactly. So when you're in a party together and you're just casually flipping through the Necronomicon. Necronomicon?
You know what he's doing? He's got another book. And he's got a Necronomicon sitting inside of it. And then all his friends are like, oh, wow, every time Steve's reading that book, my ears bleed. It's just the weirdest thing.
I know.
And I just see visions of my future death. I don't know what's going on. Like, it's just a coincidence.
I guess it's the case that if you need blood to cast your spell, you might be an evil wizard.
But
okay. I think the real answer for this comes down to what party are you playing with?
Yeah.
It's that age-old question, I guess. Can I play a Sith in my Star Wars party or a dark side user?
Yeah.
It comes down to the players, the characters, and the story.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
If all of them align and no one has a beef with you doing that, sure. If it's going to cause disruptions in the party of someone being evil, you might have to reconsider your options and see, is that cool? And that comes down to session 0, laying that groundwork and what's cool and what's not cool in your session.
And this is, I think this actually answers it quite well. I don't think that it should be hidden from the players.
No.
It should be hidden from the PCs,
Yep.
if at all.
Exactly.
And that could be a fun story to run, is, trying to hide all of that dark magic from the other players.
Yep.
But
And if you can find a creative way to hide the dark magic that fits the story, that can be really fun, as you say.
Yeah.
Like, that takes you back when I was playing D&D years and years ago. One of my mates was playing it was a gnome or elf or something like that. No, I think it was a halfling. And he was undead, but he was pretending not to be undead. So he would fake breathe.
yeah,
Like, I am breathing. But it was the best. Because all the players knew he was undead, but none of the characters knew.
Yeah.
And so none of us were on the wiser, but it was hilarious. And it was the dark casting character, but it fitted the story really well and was entertaining.
that's it. But you need to have, especially with dark things like this, where you could possibly sacrifice babies and things like that. You need to have the buy-in from.
Greg, not another baby.
No, but you get my point. You need to have.
One day is a problem. 2 I can let slide. 4,
Said the paladin.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, but
The Dice Ball podcast does not recommend killing babies. Just saying.
But absolutely, you need to have, especially with such dark tones, the buy-in from the players. You don't want to be springing this on them mid-game, and they realize that this isn't what I signed up for.
And this is, again, session 0.
This is session 0.
Talk about how if you've got a player who really wants to go down that dark path, work with them, work with the other players to make sure everybody's happy about it.
I mean, that's not to say that you can't hide things from the other players in a game. You can do that, but you've got to have that discussion about the themes that are going to be present in your game.
Yep.
That said, I don't think that you should hide this. Everyone at the table should be on board.
Yeah.
But yes, by all means, hide it from the PCs. And I think we're all in agreement.
And then it comes down to how that player can hide it from the PC.
Yes.
And if there's a narrative reason why you can hide it, cool. And it could be a fun little challenge or even a dramatic story element when the other characters find out that their best pal, Frank the Wizard, is actually their best pal, Frank the Necromancer.
Yes.
And then he's been healing them the entire time with necrotic power.
That's why my arm is all flaky and gross.
I keep wondering why my siblings age every 10 years when I come back after a combo. The weirdest thing.
Dear. So hopefully that answers that question. Now, a question that we're not going to probably get to, but I just want to make mention of it because Darren West dropped us a message with regards to it. And it is an entire episode topic, but I'll mention it very quickly. So Darren says, I know there was some talk about creating custom talents and game balance. What guidelines and rules would you use to create archetypes, i.e. species, their special abilities, skills, how to keep the flavour of your favourite other game's race, but maintain game balance? Done some work on this, just interested on perspective. That is an entire topic when talking about designing species. Now, I know that we've done it for Knight's Edge, and obviously, as I mentioned before, with halflings and hobbits, they're not actually in this book. So that's kind of the crux of where he's coming from, is that how do you go ahead and do that? We don't have time to go through that topic on this episode, but certainly we will go through that, Darren, to take a look at that in a much more in-depth look. I
think that's probably a show on its own. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, Martin, what's our next question?
And we've got one last question here. Sorry if we didn't get to yours. Yep. We have covered some of them through the course of the show.
Yeah, most of them are covered in the show.
Yep. And we'll answer them more directly on Facebook anyway as well.
Absolutely. So, yeah. But the last question comes from Theo Fertel. Is there anything you felt that they left out? So, guys, what do you think?
Some sort of crow person.
Okay, one of the things that I would have loved to have seen is the rules for, and they only really needed it for, like, they've done it with one of them. They've done like a fire elemental, I think. What I would have loved to have seen is, going by what you said before, Mike, about the sub races. Mm-hmm. What I would have liked to have seen is templates. So you could have, if you've got a skeleton, that you could basically put a fire template on him, and so he becomes a flaming skeleton. Mm. You can have a base elemental, and then you can have, if it was an air template, so you can make an air elemental, and it has this sort of stuff. Mm. That to me would have been a little bit more useful, and that's probably the only thing that I would say that is missing from the book. Obviously, we could go on infinitum about every single monster that appears in a monster manual, for example, or Paizo's Beastries, that it doesn't have that many. But that's not what this book is.
No, but
this book is a setting book. It's not a Beastry book. And hey,
that's true.
Who knows? FFG, if you're listening again, that maybe there's room to have a Beastry that can be used across multiple systems. Who knows? I think that would be cool.
Yeah. Personally, and I said this earlier, I think that there is a lack of a solid choice for like a monk,
right,
or a pugilist, or however you say that, a fist fighter.
Yep.
There's like one brawl weapon in the book. Mm-hmm. You can make a signature weapon that is a brawl weapon.
Yep.
But if you just want to use unarmed, you've got very few options or effective options to be able to do that, unless you get a buff from a spellcaster.
Yep.
I just would have liked to have seen. I don't know how prevalent that sort of a thing is in Terrinoth, but surely someone fights with their fists.
Yeah, true. Mike,
I think for me, I said it before in fun and cheek, but although there is a good selection of species, I would have liked to have seen one or two extra more non-human ones, or human-y sort of ones. Like the only one that's sort of borderlines away from being very human is the catfolk.
Yeah,
orcs in this are actually more human, I feel, than most other orcs. They're more of a half orc in this setting.
Yep.
So I think some sort of like a raven folk or bird folk or something that's quite clearly very, very different to every other species would have been great.
I would have loved to have seen something like a hobgoblin.
Yeah, like a lizardy type
or
of
a lizard folk. Yeah,
because I'm honestly, and this is my ignorance to Terrinoth and this whole setting in general, I'm not too sure what species are out there, but some sort of dragon folk, as you say, would have been fantastic. Something a little bit less human. And that's just me wanting more variety, I guess. And that's me nitpicking.
Look, these, whilst we're saying these are missing, on the whole, I just want to reiterate, it is a great book, and there is enough there for you to be able to do any story you want. Just got to get creative with the other things.
Yeah, and I mean, there's also rules under the core rulebook.
Yep.
For designing your own creatures and your own species as well. So
that's what this is
couple those two together, and you can start to make up some easy, easy races.
There's nothing stopping me from taking the Trandoshan from Star Wars and chucking into
Well, that's right.
That is true.
Absolutely.
Make them a lizard man. Definitely.
I mean, you might. I personally think that the species in here are slightly stronger than the Star Wars stuff.
It's better to take options outside of another source that are weaker than they are stronger. So,
Oh, of course, yeah. You can always
no
give
chance of
something
that.
extra.
Exactly.
Rather, it's much easier to give something extra than take away from a player. Like, yeah.
The other thing that I think that is important to mention, because we are running short on time, but the one thing that when it comes to what's missing, okay, this is a finite page count. Obviously, they can't give us, a tome which is, 2,000 pages in size. There has to be room to allow players and GMs to come up with their own creations. And there also has to be room for FFG, should they ever decide to go down the path of expanding further supplements, to add different races, to add more equipment, to add additional monsters. There has to be that, because if they were basically just going, that's all that we're going to put in our books, and we're just going to do it all in one lump, nobody does that. There is a reason why they're up to Beastery 6?
Yeah.
Or something like that, because there's new monsters always being created. So,
It's what keeps the paychecks rolling in.
exactly. So, and it's what keeps the game system alive. And that's what we really want, obviously.
We do want there to be longevity in this.
Yeah,
But-
absolutely.
Terrinoth and future setting books for Genesis are in a unique spot. So the fact they can be thick tomes, FFG
Absolutely.
can dedicate the 250 to 300 pages of space to it,
Yep.
and dedicate that space to so many elements. Like, this book has a lot of stuff in it. Like, I've from an RPG book, which isn't a core rule book.
Yep.
This is a core rule book in a weird sort of way.
Yeah.
It has that amount of stuff in it. It's chock-a-block. It's full of fluff. It's full of weapons. It's full of talents. It's full of species. It's full of monsters. It's full of everything. It's got enough there for players and the GM on equal measures. And that's all because of the unique way that Genesis lays its rule system out. It has one book 100% dedicated to the rules. That every book they release from there on in doesn't have to reprint those rules. They can save that space where the rules would normally sit and just chock-a-block it full of other stuff.
Yeah.
Because you've got the other book sitting on your bookshelf, which has all your nitty-gritty basic mechanics.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Genesis has the legs to grow, and we're only just starting to see the
Potential.
potential of it.
I mean, it's not even 12 months old yet.
No, that's it.
It's like, yes, we've had our first birthday and we completely forgot about it, which means that Genesis has had its first birthday.
true.
First birthday as well.
That's true. Yeah.
So happy birthday, yay! But Terrinoth itself isn't that old. So there is a lot more to come out, and obviously, as we mentioned, FFG have only got so many staff. And L5R is a big thing for them at the moment.
And Star Wars.
And Star Wars still
in
is a big
production.
thing. So, it's, who knows what the future will hold, but hopefully we will see more books, if not in Terrinoth, certainly in the fantasy realm, so that people can adapt.
Keyforge.
Keyforge. Yeah. I would play in that campaign.
That'd be great, because it's got a nice blend of fantasy and sci-fi. It's a nice fusion. I think it's a new IP from FFG with lots of new art assets. It's screaming book. Just saying, I would not be surprised. I'm going to call it. We might see a setting book in 2 years.
Wow.
Within 2 years.
Okay. Yeah.
If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'm always wrong.
Right.
But if I'm right, I'm extra right.
Right.
That's it.
Fair enough. So that brings us basically to the end of another show. If you have any other questions like these, or if you've got a topic you'd like us to discuss, you can send us an email to info@thedicepodcast.com, or post your questions to Facebook or Twitter. There's plenty of great community members that will come forward and speak their mind. Obviously, always done in a very polite manner. Some great discussions, really, really great community that we've got going. So please come along and join us for more episodes, and obviously for more questions that you may have, and especially if you've never ever played the game before, and go from there.
And if you're old school,
Yep.
you can visit our website, thedicepoolpodcast.com. You'll find a resources page there and information about our awesome hosts. There's other things there. There's pictures. There's even some URL coding. It's pretty dynamic. It's got all the features of a website.
Right. Yes.
You can't ask it any questions, so it's pretty unfortunate. So it's like a friendship that never gives.
But we're always giving. We're making up for the website.
Go to the Facebook page.
Yep.
Or the website. It's your choice. I'm not going to force you.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, also make sure to like and follow us on the Dice Pool Podcast on Facebook and Twitter by searching at Dice Pool Podcast. We also have a community group that is starting to get filled with a lot of lovely questions and information. It is a great resource. Come visit.
Absolutely. You can also find us on YouTube by searching at Dice Pool Podcast or on Discord via the D20 Radio channel. Well, guys, that's a wrap. That was a good episode. That was a long, basically 2.5 hours. Hopefully, if you were on the fence about buying Terrinoth, you are now well and truly in the Terrinoth camp, and definitely worth every penny that you have to spend. So, as I said, that's a wrap. I'm GM Hooly.
I'm GM Huzz.
I'm GM Flano.
And GM Caitlin isn't here, but we'll speak for her on her behalf. And together we are the Dice Pool Podcast, where adventure is just a roll away. The Dice Pool Podcast is a proud member of the D20 Radio Network. For more information about the network, visit www.d20radio.com. The Dice Pool Podcast is a fan-generated podcast. All of the information provided on the podcast and related website are not affiliated with Fantasy Flight Games or any of their licensors. The content of this podcast remains a property of the Dice Pool Podcast and is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The Genesis role-playing game, the Genesis logo, content, and all material remain the property of Fantasy Flight Games.